All right, it's 6 o'clock. Let me tell you a little bit what we're doing, and then I'll look for Ali Benevento and bring her up on the mic. So tonight is all Luigi Mangione with a special guest, Ali Benevento. Now, Ali is a criminal defense attorney of 15 years, practices in South Carolina since 2009. She's with Strom Law Firm, and but I don't think she's here representing the law firm, so I don't even want to almost say that, but just want to let you know her credentials. She's got a lot of credentials. She's an adjunct professor. She teaches at a college in criminal law writing, legal writing, and criminal law. She has defended criminal defense cases in both the state and the federal government, so this is great. I bet you, I'm curious whether Ali has ever had a situation where she defended somebody in both a state and a federal government at the same time. Bet you that hasn't happened. Seems to me that's kind of a unique thing for Luigi Mangione. Maybe not unique, but certainly not something that everybody does every single day. So I'm going to be talking to Ali about several things on my mind, and like I said, I'm going to bring her up. We'll introduce her. We'll let her have a say very, very shortly because I want to get to the guest right away. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and look for her right now and bring her up on the mic, and then I will just tell both of you at the same time the topic overflow that I want to go. So let me see if I can find Ali and bring her up. All right. I'm sending an invite to her now. And there she is preloaded in the corner. Do we have audio?
Can you hear me?
Audio. I can hear you now. Yeah, now I got to get you on full screen with me. Now, let's see. The layout's not good, so that's probably my fault. Let me see if I can fix the layout. Oh, I just made you huge and me small. You know what? That's probably okay. If you're okay with that, I'm probably okay with that.
I'll do whatever you want me to do.
All right. Your volume's a little low for me. I don't know if it's a little low for everybody else. Can we get a sound check and see if everybody's good with the volume?
All right, 1, 2, 3. Can everybody hear me?
How's that sound? I think you sounded good from my side, so that was good for me.
Perfect.
Little low, somebody says. Yeah, so, okay, well, we're right in between. I think you sounded pretty good. Somebody else?
I'll just yell.
Okay, that might actually do. All right, so Ali, you don't know if you heard some of my introduction of you, and I probably didn't do justice to your past because you've got a lot of credentials, obviously, and I don't want to be dismissive of that. Is there anything else you want to tell us about your background that I didn't hit? Some of the maybe pieces that you think would be important to know as well.
I think you did a great job. Like you said, I've been practicing primarily in the area of criminal defense for about 15 years now. I do cases in state courts, federal courts specifically in jurisdictions all over the place, not just South Carolina. I was born and raised in New York, but I've been practicing in South Carolina the whole time. But I like to do federal work in all states all across the country.
Nice. So the topics that I kind of wanted to outline tonight, I kind of got 4 major topics, and I thought what I would do, if you're willing, is I think I have questions that a lot of people have, so I'll pitch them to you, and I'll kind of do a little bit of a summary of a few things at once, and then I'll let you take the mic and go with whatever parts of it you want. The big pieces I'm looking for is to talk a little bit about the Altoona arrest. We're going to talk maybe about the eavesdropping situation in the federal, in the state, eavesdropping on the attorney-client privileges. I want to talk a little bit about Luigi and whether or not he could get a fair trial with all the publicity and the 4 different documentaries that have been done about him. And then I would like to hear, if you're willing, I don't know how much you can get into it, to understand a little bit what that relationship is between an attorney and her client, a criminal defense, and what goes on behind closed doors, how much kind of that relationship looks like, and kind of give us an insight maybe what Karen and Luigi's relationship would look like from the backside, if you're willing to talk about that. So those are kind of the things I want to hit.
Okay, well, great. So I think big picture, if you want to start by talking about can you get a fair trial, this is a question you probably hear a lot. I know it's a question I've heard a lot. Anytime that you have a case that has either a high profile defendant or, the person might be a celebrity or a particularly notorious person for whatever reason, think about P. Diddy, who's, I guess, is he Diddy now, on trial in the same district, Southern District of New York. People are paying attention. O.J. Simpson for the older crowd, Casey Anthony, people like that. There's this concern that when you have someone like that or some crime like that, that you can't possibly get a fair trial because everybody's heard of the person or everybody's heard about the crime or they've watched the news. And, now in the age of social media, everybody's TikToking about it. People might have joined in on live discussions and been tossing things around. But just because of those things, just because you might know the person, just because you might be familiar with the situation, or you might have discussed it in these forums, the trial of that person does not become unfair per se. There's no guarantee. The right to the guarantee of a fair trial is not a guarantee of anonymity. Okay, when you go into jury selection, it's not that automatically if anyone's heard of you or they've heard of the case or know anything about it, that's a disqualifier. There's a constitutional right to due process, a constitutional right to have counsel, and of course a right to have a fair trial. And part of that is that the judge during that trial, both at jury selection and as the trial progresses, presides over that voir dire process, which is how jurors are picked and selected, and also is the gatekeeper for the evidence in accordance with the rules of evidence to say what things may or may not be admissible with the end of having a fair trial. And so the jury selection process in Luigi Mangione's case will have some of those safeguards in place. You're going to be really hard pressed to find anybody who's never heard of Luigi. I guess maybe
right.
Lived under a rock, you don't know who he is, or if you don't watch the news, but part of that jury selection process will be to determine whether people, despite the fact that they know who he is or that they've heard about the case, can be fair and impartial. That's the question, right?
Right.
Do potential jurors lie during that process? Yeah, they do. And you've got women and men all over the internet fawning over this kid because he's very good looking. You best believe there are going to be some people who are going to try to lie their way onto that jury just because they want to be part of the case. And hopefully the judge and the lawyers through that voir dire process can do a good job in kind of gatekeeping on that. But the other piece of this fair trial analysis is AG Pam Bondi, just constantly at every opportunity flapping her yapper about how she's assuming that he's guilty. In current administrations, their obsession with this rhetoric of law and order and tough on crime, this resurrection of the death penalty. And while at the same time they're being very flippant about the necessity, the absolute necessity of due process and what the rule of law actually is, that's something that I'm sure that Karen will continue to bring up, as she should, because all of that rhetoric is being pumped out into the public consciousness constantly. And all of that to be a problem for him.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a question about Pam Bondi in particular, and that is, from my perspective, as the U.S. Attorney General, she shouldn't be, in my opinion, now maybe you can correct me because you're in the law field, she shouldn't be acting as a prosecutor, right? She should, to me, when she goes on in a public forum and says Luigi Mangione is a murderer of an innocent man, that's completely inappropriate. Why shouldn't she, as the head of the legal representation, believe in the presumption of innocence until proven guilty and not be calling somebody out as a murderer from national television?
Well, you're absolutely right. She should not be doing that. She actually is. She's the chief prosecutor in the United States. She's the head of the DOJ, right? So whether she's the person on the boots on the ground prosecuting Luigi, or whether she's who she is, who is the the AG of the United States of America, what she's doing is totally inappropriate. It's legally incorrect. It's totally inappropriate, and it's negatively impacting Luigi's ability to eventually have a fair trial. And that is part of the reason why you saw the judge. I don't know that the judge went as far as could have, but to remind everybody that not only is this just generally inappropriate, but there is a local rule of practice in the Southern District of New York that specifically prohibits parties to the case from making opinion statements about the defendant's guilt. And she has certainly violated that time and time and time.
I have to say, when Karen asked for the court to remind Pam Bondi of the local Rule 23, I thought to myself, this is like you're asking her to write on the chalkboard over and over again, I will not do this again, right? And I thought to myself, it almost sounded a little catty to ask that, but I'm thinking, a judge did, though. Didn't the judge actually say, please acknowledge that you understand local Rule 23.1 or whatever it was?
Yes, she did. Yeah. And it's so funny that you give that analogy. I've said that to multiple people. It's almost like the little slap on the wrist by the teacher and,
right.
Something on repeat, because it's so fundamental. She knows better. But here's the thing. I don't think she cares. And I don't think this administration cares, because from the beginning, they've used Luigi as a political football, and they've used him to push their agenda of how many people can we put to death so that we can have stats. And that is so wrong on so many different levels. But I don't think she's going to stop doing it. I really don't. I'll be very curious to see how the judge handles it. I don't think she can help her.
And here's the bad part. Like, this is what, some people have said, due to her comments and due to the 4 documentaries, there's no way Luigi can get a fair trial. But what I've tried to tell people is, unfortunately, it doesn't matter. Like, the trial is going to happen. So it's not like we can, I guess we don't have the trial because he's not going to be able to get a fair trial. They will seat a jury, and like you said, they're just going to ask, hey, despite what you've heard, can you be impartial? And they'll just say, yes, I can be impartial, and we'll move on. It's not like they're going to dismiss the case because he's not going to get a fair trial. So it's going to happen.
Correct. And the judge has the responsibility to do everything she possibly can to make sure that happens. Now, it's not foolproof and it's not perfect, but I do believe it will be a pretty tedious jury selection process for that reason, among other reasons.
Right. And what do you think about, since we're kind of on this topic right now, what do you think about the fact that I think Karen Agnifilo said, I don't know if it's Agnifilo or Agnifilo, but I tend to just kind of run it all together.
That's it.
Yeah. What do you think about the fact that she has stated that they're getting some of the information, like discovery, from documentaries? That law enforcement is literally talking to the media before they talk to her about, or the prosecution before they talk to her, and that how inappropriate it is that she has to hear from national TV what's going on with the prosecution. What do you think about that?
Totally inappropriate. So under the rules of discovery, when the prosecution receives information from law enforcement, whether at the state level, that's the NYPD, whether at the federal level, that's the FBI. When they receive that information, they are to turn it over to the defense in a timely manner, assuming the defense has filed a motion to receive those materials, which has done. And so it is wholly inappropriate for them to be withholding that information and yet using it to push their agenda in the media, in public spaces, and elsewhere. Because what that's doing, that's handicapping Karen, putting her at a disadvantage, but it's also unethical. I'm going to go ahead and call it out for what it is. It's unethical behavior. If you have it,
right,
turn it over. There's no hide the ball, despite what people see and think about television and movies. Criminal court is supposed to be, if you have it, you intend to use it, you turn it over, and including any information that may tend to prove the defendant's innocence or may even be used in a way that's exculpatory. And they haven't done that.
Right, and it's funny because I'm showing my age here, but I've said this over and over again. We don't have Perry Mason trials in America, right? There's no surprises when you get into the courtroom. There's not going to be some surprise like, oh my gosh, we did. Like the defense knows exactly what the prosecution's strategy is, and vice versa, right? And so there should never be a big surprise, So that's not the way it works.
I'll put it that way. If there are any big because that usually means that there's been some kind of discovery violation by the government.
So, I guess, again, since we're on this topic, what do you feel about this whole dual prosecution, the state and the federal government fighting over who's going to go first? The federal government ceded it to the state, but now Karen's asking for the federal government to go first. What are your thoughts about that whole process?
So, a lot of people have been confused about it. Technically, they're allowed to do what they're doing, right? The allegations are violations of federal law, which give the feds jurisdiction. There are violations of state law, which allow the state to prosecute the case. Stuff like this really doesn't happen. I will say, by way of example, if you have a drug case, for example, and somebody is accused of trafficking drugs, the state of New York makes it illegal to traffic drugs, and the federal government makes it illegal to traffic drugs. And so oftentimes what you'll have is somebody's arrested, they're accused of trafficking, and both the state and the feds will get together and decide who gets to keep the case. If it's particularly sexy or interesting, or it's a ton of drugs, the feds will usually want to keep it. But it's very rare that you see that the state and the feds are engaging in a concurrent prosecution of one defendant for one course of conduct. And I think, the federal government's not fooling anybody. We know exactly what they're doing with Luigi, and we know why they're doing it. They are pushing this administration's agenda regarding the death penalty, and this is the only way that they can do it. Because, of course, as everybody knows, New York State has not imposed the death penalty in decades.
So, I mean, it's funny because we're already off script and we just got started. Here's the problem I have too. Karen made an interesting statement in that 57-page motion that she filed that stated, in order to defend himself in the state case, it may jeopardize his federal case, because you basically are having two different theories about what he did, and to defend himself in one, it prejudices himself in the other. And so I understand that the reason now why she'd say, let's just have the federal government go. And because she also seemed to indicate in there that in previous other cases, if the federal government has already tried somebody and get a conviction or whatever, then the state just gives up on it. They don't double jeopardy. They don't try them again. They're like, good enough. That was good enough. So why even have a second trial, right? So what do you think about that?
I think she's being incredible. So first of all, she's amazing. She's an incredibly gifted, talented, smart lawyer. She knows exactly what she's doing. If she can handle the more serious case, which is the federal case, and somehow get the death penalty out of the way or off the table, she can then, if needed, turn her attention to that state case, and the stakes will not be as high. So I understand strategically why she's doing what she's doing. I hope it works out. And, a practice note here is that federal cases tend to move quicker than state cases all over the country. The state is notoriously slow. I don't care what state you're in. I've practiced in state cases in various jurisdictions as well. The feds are efficient, they're quick, and their docket moves faster. So for the feds in this particular case to try to say that they were waiting for the Manhattan DA's office to bring and try their case first, that's highly unusual. Typically, we call it a rocket docket. Those federal courts, they get it and they go. Now, this is a little bit different because it's a death penalty case, but it makes sense for that federal case to go first. I'm on Team Karen on this one. I think that's exactly the way that you approach that.
So let me ask you this question. So early on, Karen filed a motion to basically preclude the death penalty, and the prosecution came back with basically, you're too early. It's not ripe, right? So that was the phrasing they used. This is not ripe. We haven't even officially notified you that we're indicting him, or that we're, well, first of all, they hadn't indicted him at that point, and then they hadn't charged him with the death penalty. They said, so they basically, and I've been telling people, it seemed to me that there was a behind the door agreement with Karen that they weren't going to go for the death penalty. And then all of a sudden they change, Pam Bondi comes in and says, go for it. And she's like, okay, well, if that's what you're going to do and you're going to go for the death penalty, that changes things. Now, maybe that didn't happen. I can't prove that behind the door thing, but it looked that way from documents. But what I'm curious about is, okay, so I felt, I'm not a lawyer, I felt she had a really good argument why the death penalty at least should be taken off the table. And that was on the first motion. And basically the judge said, okay, it's a moot point now. They've indicted him. You were a little early on that. Now that he's been indicted, or we've charged him with the death penalty, now you can come back with a new form and she's going to redraft that. What do you think the chances are? I feel like there's a lot of grounds here to take the death penalty off the table at least. What do you think?
I think she's made some very valid arguments. And just for a second, so the whole way that thing went down was total BS. Pam Bondi knew exactly what she was doing. They inappropriately announced that they were seeking the death penalty in a case that they hadn't even brought to the grand jury to indict yet. And so I don't blame Karen for responding. She had to do something. And then for them to then turn around and say, well, this is inappropriate because it's not timely. Your actions were inappropriate and not timely because your loudmouth AG was getting all over the internet and all over television announcing what they were going to do in a case that they hadn't even taken to the grand jury.
Right.
But in terms of, whether we think it'll actually come off the table, that's a prosecution decision. They can elect to move forward with it. I do not personally, and I'll be happy, very happy to be wrong about this, but I do not see them taking it off the table, regardless of how meritorious Karen A's arguments are. So she's already made some darn good ones. I don't think it's going to make a big bit of difference because I think that they're using Luigi as a political statement piece.
Unfortunately, I tend to agree that this seems to be, they want to make an example of this situation. One of the questions I have is, I had another attorney on before, Cynthia Thornton, and she mentioned that unfortunately, when the death penalty is on the table, right, they have to impanel a jury that is qualified for the death penalty. And those are more likely to convict on something. right? So it actually, in a way, makes it more likely Luigi will get at minimum life in prison, because if they're willing to give the death penalty, and they have to be, impaneled that they're willing to, then they may be more inclined to convict on something, whether it's the death penalty or not. What do you think?
I mean, I can see that. So, the willingness to impose the death penalty, believe the way that they ask it is really just, are you willing to follow the law as it exists, more so than it is, are you pro-death penalty, which I think is a very important distinction. So they won't necessarily be pro-death penalty jurors. They should be, ideally, open-minded jurors who are willing to uphold and apply the law, considering everything that takes place at that penalty phase. It's basically a second trial, which will happen. If he is found guilty in the guilt phase, they will hold a whole second trial to determine whether death is an appropriate sentence. But I see what you're saying, and I don't, you're probably not wrong.
And is it true that even though it's a separate, you have the one trial that's for the guilt, and then you have the other trial for is death penalty the only thing that's acceptable or appropriate? Isn't that the same jury, though? They just kind of, it's the same exact jury, right? But they'll just kind of restart the process of, okay, is death penalty the only option here and the right option?
Yes, and the prosecution will make arguments as to why it's appropriate, and then Karen will be able to come in mitigation and offer evidence as to why they should consider another option. And they would
so what do you...
I believe, don't quote me on this, in the Southern District of New York, I believe it will have to be unanimous.
Yes, I think that's correct. I think that's what I read, at least. I think that's correct. So what do you think about the, I had a question and now it just went out my brain that fast. Oh my gosh. Maybe you should talk for a minute until I get my brain back. I just lost my question. I had a really good question.
I'll give you a second to get it back.
Yeah. It has to do with the trial. I don't know. Let's just go with this. Let me ask you this. This is getting ahead of ourselves as well. And I think people have gotten a little excited about the idea of the big words, jury nullification, right? The idea that a jury, and I just remember what the actual question was. So I got two things, the jury nullification question, but also the question about the state of New York hasn't executed somebody since like 2004, I think. They basically don't, I would say it this way. The state of New York doesn't believe in the death penalty anymore, but the federal government still does. So my two questions for you now, because it was going to be one, is do you think because New York doesn't in general believe in the death penalty, that it'll be harder for them to, even in the Southern District of New York, to get that death penalty in a state that really doesn't believe in the death penalty? And what do you think, is jury nullification a pipe dream, or is it a real possibility in that case?
So I do think, as to the first part of your question, that it will be very difficult. You are going to have jurors summoned from the Southern District of New York. These are New Yorkers who are going to be sitting on this jury. I can't speak for all New Yorkers, but generally it is a more politically liberal jurisdiction. You're going to have jurors that statistically are going to be less inclined to vote for a harsh sentence such as the death penalty. So I do think that even if Luigi were to be convicted in the Southern District of New York, and I don't think that's a foregone conclusion, that it would be difficult for the government to win on the issue of the death penalty. As to jury nullification, I say, you know what, Karen, go for it. She has a client who has become a worldwide phenomenon. I don't know if it's just because he's real pretty. I don't know if it's, the deeper, more ideological, argument concerning healthcare and capitalism, or some combination of those two things. But I think anybody who can look back in recent memory at a high-profile case can say, we have never seen anything like this before in modern history, where society at large has become so enamored with a defendant in a criminal case accused of objectively a heinous crime. And so I think that jury nullification is not a pipe dream. I think it is entirely possible. I think that jurors, if the internet and TikTok comments and Instagram comments are any indicator of the type of affection or reception that Luigi Mangione gets generally, I think you will see that at least somewhat reflected in a jury pool. And I think jurors will be looking for a reason not to harm him. And so I don't think it's a pipe dream. I think it's entirely possible. Now, do I think it's going to be all 12 that will vote unanimously that he's not guilty? that's probably a little bit more of a stretch, but I think a hung jury is a distinct possibility in this case.
I think it's interesting because on the jury nullification thing, it's one of those areas, from what I understand, that I can't remember the legal term for it, but basically a jury is supposed to understand that that's their right. They're not told it's their right. They're not instructed about jury nullification. It's supposed to be implied that you understand a jury's verdict is final, right? And they literally, a jury could say, yes, he's guilty of breaking the law, but no, we find him not guilty of any punishment. And that's not, and they don't have to explain themselves. The jury doesn't have to explain their decision to the judge, from what I understand. He has to uphold their decision. If they say we're not going to find him guilty, even though we believe he broke the law, that would be a jury nullification situation. I just think it's interesting that we have, because there's a truck going around New York with the words jury nullification written on the side of the truck, and it drives all over New York all the time to let people know, because they're not going to educate the jury about jury nullification. You kind of have to know it going in.
Yeah, for sure. And, and the other thing too is that in terms of jury nullification, the jury is going to be so at the point in time where it gets to the point for them to make a decision. Again, I think they're going to be looking for a reason, but at the same time, we have to understand that the stakes being so high for him, and everybody is going to know what the potential next step in the punishment is, they're going to be looking for a way to wiggle out of that. And even if the evidence shows that they think he might have done it, or they think, maybe he did it, if they can say, or they can hang their hats on, but I don't think that the government did a good job, I think the government botched the investigation, or I don't think the government can prove it, there's a difference between a legal finding of not guilty and somebody thinking that someone is absolutely innocent. So the jury may also take that route as well and say, listen, I think he might have done it, or even I think he probably did do it, but I don't think that they proved it. And that's another, possibility for Luigi as well.
And there's a I'm stumbling on myself because it's not a popular opinion to talk about, but there's a portion of the population that feels even if he did it, there was some sort of justification in it, right? That this is a system that's out of control, and passing legislation doesn't fix anything, and voting new people into office doesn't fix anything. And every single time the government steps in to try to curb the healthcare situation, it just gets worse and they find new loopholes. And so there's a part of people who say, you know what? They kind of had it coming. Now, I hate saying that, right? But that's a real sentiment out there in people. And that could be a reason for jury nullification as well. It's like, hey, look, they had that kind of coming.
Absolutely. I don't even think that that's a fringe sentiment. I think that's fairly mainstream at this point. When I've been speaking to people about this case, I think a lot of people feel that way. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but lawyers, we all kind of joke, criminal defense lawyers, we have twisted senses of humor. We have to get through our day. But we kind of joke, there's a defense in a murder case that nobody talks about. MFer needed killing, and so
right.
I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I think there are a lot of people that might say, listen, he had to go because, like you said, we are so desperate for some type of reform. We are so desperate for change. No one is listening to us. Nothing is changing. And this isn't just people's money. These are people's lives, children, people are dying. What else is somebody going to do? And that's how and why Luigi has become this savior and this figure to people is because of that. So yeah, I think that's a very popular and common thing.
I'm not sure if you saw the Law and Order episode, the folk hero. Did you see that? Okay. Well, a lot of people didn't want to watch it because, of course, they don't like all this prejudicial stuff. But honestly, that episode was more positive for Luigi Mangione. It showed him as a folk hero, that people were like, we don't want this guy getting caught. We don't care if he did it or not. He's a man of the people. He cares about the little people. The little people have been trampled on. It was kind of a class warfare kind of thing. And the interesting thing that came out of it, and by the way, I have to caution, we have to be super careful on TikTok because anytime you even sympathize with somebody, they kind of view that as maybe hate speech or whatever. So YouTube's a little bit more tolerant. So I got to be careful. But where I'm going with it is that there was a moment in this show where they said, if Luigi did it, or if again, it had a fictional character that was portraying Luigi, but if he did it, if it was a defense of others situation, meaning that every moment that the healthcare system has got a denial system that's denying 90% of things incorrectly, people are literally dying while that's happening. So is it a defense of others situation? And the way the judge handled it, we'll never get a judge like this, I don't think, never. But the judge was like, look, the law wasn't written for this kind of thing. And they said, look, the defense of others doctrine doesn't say the person has to be standing right in front of you for you to save their life. So what if this person was trying to save lives? Is that a legitimate tactic? Could that ever fly in court?
I mean, I think you could try it. I mean, the Menendez brothers tried a somewhat similar approach with their, imperfect self-defense claim. That didn't work out real great. Didn't work out real great for them. And it's unclear, really, in this case, what level of tolerance the judges in the federal case and in the state case would have for something unconventional like that, because it really is kind of an unconventional argument. Because, like you said, the law was not built for these types of situations. The law is very black and white. It doesn't contemplate these, lofty ideological considerations. But, some people might also argue that that type of argument is really just a veiled argument for jury nullification. So that actually kind of flows nicely from our last question, that if Karen and her team did take that approach, that essentially they might get popped or cautioned by the judge for trying to say that they were actually arguing for jury nullification.
Yeah. It's funny because when Karen responded to Pam Bondi, she literally said, she called the healthcare industry a murderous healthcare industry. And so I thought, oh my gosh, she is going to go for that defense. She's going to go for hey, look, this is a predatory system and somebody got angry and, but I don't know how that's going to fly in a court, because I don't imagine any judge, like if I were the prosecution, I would say, objection, Your Honor, the healthcare system's not on trial here, Luigi Mangione is. And I would expect a judge to uphold that and say, yeah, I agree.
And the healthcare system wasn't dismantled, and yet we have a man who was murdered. I can agree with you. I think that would get a whole lot of pushback, and I'll be very curious to see how the judge would handle it. Because again, it's very unconventional argument, but I can also see it happening. I mean, it's really pretty interesting that all those years ago, that the Menendez brothers lawyer actually got away with that the first go around at trial. So I'll be curious to see how far Karen A goes with it.
Well, so let me say this. One, so far this conversation is fantastic. I love the dialogue we're having, and that there's 3 other issues I want to get to. So I wanted to maybe see if we can push into one of these. Let's talk about that eavesdropping situation, the allegations of the eavesdropping. One of the things I heard you say, yeah, right. One of the things I heard you say recently, and it made me question my own thing, which was you said something to the effect of, you as the criminal defense attorney have an obligation to secure your conversation with your client. So the prosecution kind of came back and said, well, Karen didn't use a secure line. She didn't identify that was a secure line. So my 2-part question to you is, is it Karen's fault that this phone call was eavesdropped on? And at the point that the paralegal realized what that call was, did they have a legal obligation to stop that listening in on the call and not go tell people what was said on the call?
Yep. Not Karen's fault. So yes, and again, I don't know what the New York State rules of professional conduct look like exactly, but just by way of example, in South Carolina, the rules of professional conduct say that I, as the lawyer, have a duty to ensure that I'm not putting myself in a situation with my client where that could be overheard or where it could be tapped or monitored. That does not mean that it is my responsibility when I go into detention center with a detained client who has no bond to make sure that the jail is not doing something or is doing something. That is on the Metro Detention Center. They were not born yesterday. They know exactly what they're doing. Shame on them. Shame on the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Shame on the district attorney and every lawyer in that chain of command, and shame on that paralegal. Now, some people want to give that paralegal a little bit of leave. Oh, maybe he didn't know or she didn't know. You know what? Bull. You've been doing this job who knows how long. That's 101, confidentiality and the sanctity of attorney-client privilege. It's all we have. We are, as criminal defense lawyers, we are the underdog in a system that is consistently trying to steamroll defendants into pleading guilty or into convictions, depriving people of their liberty day in and day out. That paralegal, if you didn't know better, they've got a serious personnel problem at the Manhattan DA's office. Not Karen's responsibility. I don't care what kind of line she was on. That recording should have never been sent to the Manhattan DA's office. And even if you can give somebody a pass and say it was a mistake, that paralegal should have stopped listening immediately. And you know what else? The U.S. Attorney's Office shouldn't have lied about it, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times. That's really where my issue is. Get your story straight. Because now here's the thing. I don't believe a single word that comes out of their mouth because they're full of it.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because to me it seemed like, and I wanted to ask you if you thought they lied. There was 2 points that I thought they lied. One, Your Honor, this is the first we've heard of the eavesdropping. That was a lie, number one. And then number two, this amended letter. Oh, you know what? The paralegal immediately dropped the call as soon as they realized what was happening. Then later on, okay, you know what? And second thought, the paralegal listened to the entire content of the call and then told everybody about it, kind of thing, and put that in writing. So there are multiple lies, and is it not prosecutorial misconduct? And how does that get dealt with?
My personal favorite lie was when they first said they didn't know, and then they came back and said, well, we knew, but we didn't know that we knew. What? That was my favorite. That was even better than the two that followed. But yes, I think it is, mistakes happen. Let me say this. Mistakes happen, and we are human, and this system is full of human players, right? But first of all, that is again, so fundamental to the system of justice, the sanctity of attorney-client privilege. But let's say a mistake did happen. It is the way that you respond to it, how you isolate that particular piece of conversation, how you handle the person that had the breach. Have you walled that person off? Has that person been recused from the case? Have you been forthcoming as an officer of the court with the judge about what happened? And again, my big issue is not the mistake, and I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that I don't think that they deserve. I don't know that it was a mistake, but let's say for sake of argument that it was. It was handled so poorly, so unethically, so shadily. Is that a word? They were being the way that they handled it, that they have lost so much credibility. And the only person that suffers as a result is Luigi, who is the very person who deserved the protection of a confidential conversation with his lawyer. Absolutely no exceptions. I don't know what the contents of that call was, and frankly, I don't care. I think it's reprehensible what they did, and it's even more reprehensible the way that they handled it.
And how do you put the genie back in the bottle? I mean, if there was something significant discussed on that call, now everyone in the prosecution, and not only just that office, the federal prosecution office and the state office, both now have that, and you can't take that genie out of the bottle. It's done.
You can't. That's why I hope to God that it was an innocuous conversation. Hey, how are you? Good hair day, bad hair day. I don't know what they were talking about. I hope that it was nothing important, but regardless, whatever was discussed, the prosecution will not be able to make use of it directly or indirectly or in any derivative way at trial. That the judge will be very, very clear about that. And I don't think that we as the public will ever even get to find out an outline or a general overview of what was discussed in that call, probably, because I think that any discussion surrounding that will be handled pre-trial and at the risk of divulging more confidential information to the public. I don't know that we'll ever find out the contents of that call. I hope to God is innocent.
Do you have a feeling about the prosecutor? I think it was in the federal case that was recused. Now it's unclear whether they recused themselves because they got a promotion or something, some people said, or whether it was behind the scenes, let's say that we've dealt with it and somebody's been fired from the case for the thing. Do you have any feelings about the recusal, what really happened or not?
The best part about the recusal is that they essentially made it like a footnote to their last letter with their fourth letter about the eavesdrop phone call. That was the best part. They were like, oh, by the way, that prosecutor is not here anymore. Oh, well, and they didn't give a reason. Here's what I think happened. I think they had to make it look like heads rolled when I don't think anybody's head actually rolled after that happened. And that was their attempt to say, we have removed the person who was supervising the team at the time. We've now got we've got fresh eyes and fresh blood in charge of this team. And they were doing that to make it look as though they were dealing with the situation. Probably a bunch of people, but...
I'm so glad you said that, because that was my take. And again, I'm not an attorney, but my take was just like you said, because it was wrapped into oh, by the way, we did listen to the whole call. And by the way, also, this guy's recused himself or whatever. I thought to myself, this is hey, we've taken care of the problem, even though they're not saying it was us taking care of the problem, so that they hopefully don't get any bigger repercussions. So I like that. But, when I was looking up the possible punishments for that kind of behavior, you could be disbarred for that. You can have even criminal charges brought against you. But it just seems like it's one of those, hey, we took care of the problem, so there's no need to get any further than that. We took care of the problem,
and they're going to continue to lie about what actually happened.
Right. So let's get into, because I want to leave some time at the end for questions from everybody else. Let's get into the Altoona arrest a little bit. And I want to talk specifically about, I've been beating a horse. I educated myself on a nuance of the law in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It's not illegal to provide false identification to a police officer unless you've been informed you're under investigation. And it was clear for 17 minutes that Luigi Mangione was not informed he was under investigation. And there's a moment where Karen actually pointed out, this is the moment the officer said, hey, by the way, you are now under investigation. Do you want to keep giving us that false name? And he said, no. So I'm like, oh my God, that cop knew the law. The other ones apparently didn't know the law. Now, where I'm going with all this is, Thomas Dickey files a motion, and it was a lot softer than Karen's. Karen's like blew the lid off of it and went way deeper. But it basically was, hey, look, you illegally detained him, and no bullshit can be changed about how he was detained. He was not free to go, and you know it. You interrogated him for some time without reading his Miranda rights or informing him he's under investigation. That's against the law. You then did a warrantless search of his backpack, and when you realized, as Karen pointed out, when the cop realized she had made a devastating mistake, she immediately repacked the bag, and somebody said, I think we kind of need a warrant for that. Like, the whole thing's a cluster, right? So let's talk about that arrest. Obviously, if the arrest is illegal, there are those who think, oh, well, Luigi walks. There's no gun, there's no manifesto, there's no this, there's no that. But there's no way they're going to drop this case. Like, they're gonna have plenty of evidence with cameras and everything else to go through with it. But how damaging will it be to the case if they lose the gun due to the warrantless search and the manifesto that he supposedly had, which was a word that the police used, and all these other things? What is the repercussions on that?
I think it could be potentially big. Now, do I think that's going to make everything go away if they lose the gun? No, I disagree with a lot of people. They've been talking, what if the gun goes away? Well, the gun can go away, but the video has not gone away. Now, any statements that he made prior to that point in time where those idiots realized that, they had to do things a certain way and they had like a, oh, shoot, the Constitution moment. Anything that he said prior to that, I think that there's a good chance that will be included. I also think there's a good chance, based on exactly what you were saying about the statute in Pennsylvania regarding false information to police. I think there's a chance that goes away. But again, that's the least of his problems. That's kind of like, okay, the cut on my knee is healed, but the gaping gunshot wound in my stomach is still bleeding, kind of thing. But I do think it'll be interesting to see. I don't think that it will have an impact so big that it's going to move the ball significantly for Luigi. But I do think that all of these little things, all of these little ways in which the lawyers in both the Pennsylvania case and the 2 New York State cases can start chipping away at this and showing just like you said, what a Charlie Foxtrot the investigation was in its entirety. They're going to start to lose confidence in law enforcement. They'll then start to lose confidence in the prosecution. And then we might find ourselves in that jury nullification situation where they say, what a mess this was. What a bunch of jokers. You're trying to put this kid to death and you can't even handle the very basic street cop 101 interaction with a suspect rules. And I think that could potentially work out in Luigi's favor. We'll see.
This is one of the things that bothers me. I'm not a facial recognition expert. And by the way, Karen pointed out the officers are also not facial recognition experts, and they shouldn't be brought onto the stand and say, hey, my expert opinion is that this is the shooter. The idea that officer immediately recognized the shooter, to me, is asinine. And I'll tell you why. I would swear to you Jake Gyllenhaal was the one who was in the hostel, right? That looks more like Jake Gyllenhaal to me than Luigi Mangione. So for him to say, oh, I immediately recognized him as the shooter. And there are people out there who will say, we know Luigi did it. We've got him on camera. Like, you got a masked guy on camera. You can't tell who that is. Why is it that some people think you literally have seen Luigi pull the trigger? We don't know who pulled the trigger. You can't see his face. But the cop wants you to think that he immediately recognizes the shooter and knows it's him.
And you know what they're doing with that? Because here's the thing. Jurors are the smartest people in the world. They are not stupid, okay? They don't need some beat cop from New York City to get up and try to tell them what their own eyes can see in a video. We have to let jurors draw their own conclusions. They are so smart. Juries are so smart. They pick up on things. And lawyers make big mistakes when they think that juries are not smart, because they are. And so for the government to try to come in and say, we need 3 uniformed police officers to come in and tell you what your eyes see, that's BS. They don't. What they're is to bolster that identification by having it be made by 3 police officers instead of allowing a jury of 12 citizens of New York to believe their own eyes. What is the phrase? Who are you going to believe, me or your lion-ass eyes? That's essentially what they're trying to do. And it's improper. I love that Karen went after them on that.
So I want to ask you one big, pretty controversial, like at least I feel it's pretty controversial. So I don't know what you are willing to say on it. I'm just going to tell you, I've always had in the back of my mind how much you as a criminal defense lawyer know about your client's guilt, right? Have you had situations, and you don't have to answer this, could be a rhetorical question, where your client has admitted to you, yeah, I did it, but you still have an obligation, right, to defend them and give them the best defense. And along that lines, you had a comment one time about, what I think it was kind of like, in a perfect world, the prosecution and the defense should be seeking justice. What happened and what is the right thing? But I will tell people, and I often say, the prosecution doesn't give a shit what really happened. And the defense also doesn't really give a shit what really happened. That's for the jury to decide, or the judge to decide, right? And so you're going to do your best to make sure that anything that looks bad for your guy doesn't get in or does get in, depending on what side you're on. And it's the jury's job to decide guilt or whatever. So along that lines, what you're willing to share, what does the relationship look like between, say, Karen and Luigi? Could he have admitted things to her, and she's still going to do her best to get him off on the thing? Because how does that look? As delicately as you can say that, and how often does the you've, like, again, to finish the thought, you know exactly what the prosecution is going to present. You have to see their entire case. You already probably have formed an opinion about whether or not the guy really or the girl is really guilty. You already kind of feel that, right? But you have an obligation to defend them. So where does that line draw? The morals, the ethics of, I know this person may have done it, but I have an obligation to get a fair trial. How's that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are clients who do tell me, like, this is exactly what I did. And I know, for example, that I can't necessarily put that person on the stand. Because as their lawyer, I'm not allowed to put them on the stand if I know that they're going to lie, for example. But my job as their lawyer is not to get them off. Of course, I'm hoping for the best possible outcome for my client. My job is to make sure the state or the feds do their job, because they are trying to take my client's life from him. They are trying to take my client's liberty from him. And it is my job to make sure that every T is crossed, every I is dotted in that pursuit. Because if the criminal defense lawyer is not the gatekeeper, then we have a slippery slope where prosecutors and the government are going to be able to come in and, without due process, accuse somebody of a crime, without following the rules of court, without following the Constitution, be able to take that person away from his family and throw him into a prison cell for years, or, God forbid, worst case scenario, put that person to death. No, my job is to make sure that they're doing their job. So it doesn't matter whether the guy comes up to me and said, I killed him and I liked it. It is still my job to make sure that they can prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. And there's a difference between somebody being innocent of a crime and somebody being not guilty. If the prosecution cannot prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt, that person is not guilty. The judge will instruct the jury, if you do not believe that the prosecution has met its burden, even if you think that person probably did it, you have sworn an oath to find that person not guilty, because you are here to hold the prosecution to its burden. So yes, I've got people who tell me they're guilty. It doesn't matter to me. My job is the same regardless.
Thank you for sharing that. It was another thing that I've been saying all along, which is, regardless of whether you think he's guilty or not, you have to uphold the law, and you can't plant evidence. You can't do things that are illegal. You need to play by the rules, even if you know he's guilty. And there's a part of me as a human being who understands, as a law enforcement officer, you probably get tired of watching people walk for things that you know they're guilty of because they got off on some technicality. And so I could see how maybe somebody might feel like, look, I know this person's guilty, and if the gun was 5 feet over from where it is right now, it'd be a hell of a lot better case. So I'm just going to kind of shove it over there and make sure it's in the right place. I can feel how they might feel that's justified, but you can't do that shit. You've got to play by the law. You can't do, so there's a lot of questions people are asking. Did the officer turn off their body cam footage and then plant the gun? Is there evidence that was moved from New York and put into the backpack in Altoona so they can get a reason to bring him back to New York? And we don't know if that stuff happened. So it's a real shady thing. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but yeah.
I love body-worn cameras and I hate body-worn cameras. I love body-worn cameras because in addition to criminal defense, I also do a good bit of civil rights work. And I will say that that has been a game changer for kind of curbing and exposing police misconduct. I mean, I've got cases where I'm watching a video and all of a sudden I see the cop say, body camera, body camera. They're telling their body camera like they know they're on body camera. So you know something shady's about to happen. The flip side to that is I've had a lot of clients say some real dumb shit on body worn camera footage, and I don't necessarily love that. But it does seem a little sketchy that there are places, at least from looking at Karen's motion, where the police intentionally turned off their body-worn cameras. There are certain situations where policy says that that's okay for them to do, like when they're interacting with a victim, for example, or particularly sensitive content. But when they're scheming with their buddies about how to screw somebody over and cover their oopsie because they did something wrong, that's not the time they're allowed to turn off their body-worn camera.
Right. Well, here's the thing. I want to leave us a little bit of time for those questions from everybody else, because I've been rambling for a long time and you haven't. I want to, kind of wrap up with you and I before we go to questions and answers. Thank you so much for coming on the show and giving all these great thoughts. People love to hear from somebody who actually practices law. I really loved the whole part about giving some insight into that attorney and client relationship, and and the fact that sometimes you do know your client's guilty and you still have that responsibility to defend them. So I want to open it up for questions in the group. I've got a moderator or two that might pin a comment to us to the top so we can pay attention to it. So if you got some questions for us, moderators, let's go ahead and get some questions. Or if you're just out there in the audience and want to throw a question up, I'll let her answer the questions. You don't need to hear from me. You hear from me all the time. Let's see. Any questions coming up, moderators? What do you think will realistically happen in this case? Do you have an opinion on that?
So, that's tricky. So I haven't seen the evidence. I tell my clients this all the time. Everybody always wants to know what's going to happen. What's the ultimate, what's going to happen at the end? If you get diagnosed with cancer, you're going to want to ask your doctor, well, how bad is my cancer and what's my prognosis? But until that doctor gets in there and does a biopsy and actually sees what she's looking at, she can't tell you how bad your cancer is or what your prognosis is. Similarly, in a criminal case, until I see the evidence and I'm able to analyze it and see exactly what the prosecution intends to offer, it's really difficult for me to say what I think a likely outcome will be. Now, based on everything we know about this case, I think that a hung jury is entirely possible. But beyond that, it's pretty tricky for me to say what's going to happen. I don't think that a Southern District of New York jury is going to vote to put him to death. I can tell you that.
Do you think there's, a lot? I mean, I want to get back to the questions from them, but do you think there's a legitimate possibility of anything less than life in prison without possibility of parole? Like, I agree that I feel like they're not going to probably get the death penalty, but I think that the minimum he's going to get is life in prison without the possibility of parole. How likely is it that you think he's going to get something lesser or walk on a jury nullification situation or whatever like that?
That's tricky. Like, are you saying if he's found guilty, do I think that there's a possibility if he doesn't get death that he would get less than life without parole?
Well, even more so, like, do you think there's a real legitimate possibility he won't be found guilty?
I think that there is a realistic possibility that there's a hung jury. I think it's less likely that 12 people would unanimously vote to acquit him. That is a little bit harder for me to wrap my head around. I'd be happy to be wrong about that.
And again, let's get back to questions, but I feel like the hung jury, though, means that they could retry it until they in theory, there's no limit on how many times they could retry it, right? But yeah, okay, let's look for more questions. Let's see.
Hung jury, would Luigi have another trial? Yes. Give some examples of discussions that happen between attorney and client about everything. I mean, I say, tell me what happened, and sometimes they tell me. Sometimes they tell me about your day, and they tell me about your childhood, your mental health issues, your addiction issues. Tell me about the victim. It's really up to the client how much they want to share, and I don't press the issue unless we're having a conversation about whether the person needs to testify, because as a lawyer, I am not permitted ethically to put a client on the stand if I know she will lie. You just might get deported to Italy if he gets off. I don't know. I've never heard that. Funny.
Somebody made a comment. We kind of talked about this earlier, but somebody made the comment, without the evidence found in Altoona, they really don't have a case or anything. But I think we talked about they do. They have cameras, they have, hotel receipts, they've got all kinds of tracking that they've done on them, stuff like that. So I don't think the case goes away at all without the Altoona arrest, although I think it significantly weakens what they've got.
How long do you think the trials will last? A long time. Weeks. What can happen with the missing body cam? How would that play in trial? Okay, so that's actually a pretty interesting question. I think that it's possible that, so here's the thing, if I'm the defense attorney, I'm bringing that up on cross-examination. Why did you turn your body camera off? And then I'm looking at the jury like, yeah, why'd they turn their body camera off? To try to get that negative inference. That's what I think will happen with that. I don't think the judge will probably let her have much more leeway than that. Do you think the feds rushed this case and it will backfire for them? Possibly. I do think they rushed the case, but I think they did it because Pam and Donald told them to. Karen suggests the gun was planted in the motion. No, she didn't come right out and say that. Now they did. There was some funny business about when it was or wasn't in the backpack.
Somebody asked, can he plead insanity? From what I understand, that's almost an impossibility. They would have had to early on indicate that he had mental health issues, and they certainly couldn't be asking for a laptop for him to help in his defense if he had any kind of mental impairments. I don't think the insanity thing can be played, but could it?
That would be tricky. There's probably a deadline for them to make that claim. He would have to have a competency evaluation that would be ordered by the court. It's also possible that his lawyers would want to do a private evaluation. I haven't seen any indication that that's the direction they're leaning in. So I would be surprised if that was something that was raised. Do you think he'll testify? No. What about the lookalikes? They had a reasonable doubt. Yeah, it is.
Well, I want to back up. To you said, do you think he'll testify? No. If there was ever a client who's going to resonate with the jury, wouldn't it be Luigi Mangione? He seems to have, everybody loves this guy. He's the all-American kid. He looks sweet. Everybody loves him. I agree, like most defense attorneys would say that you're never going to have your client get on the stand and speak. But if there ever was a case, O.J. Simpson wanted to speak to the jury because of the same reason. He thought, like, I love, people love me. Let me talk to the jury and I'll be able to win the jury over. Is there any situation you think Luigi's going to talk to the jury?
Maybe, but I think Karen, they're doing such a good job of just his image out there in the public now that almost kind of speaks as well. And a lot of it depends on going back to attorney-client communication. A lot of it depends on, what have they talked about? We don't know what he's told Karen about what he did or didn't do, but she's got a responsibility. She can't put him on the stand for him to lie. And you best believe that they're going to cross him and say, you shot Brian Thompson, didn't you? That's on video. That's you, isn't it? And she cannot elicit false testimony. And so if there's any question or any issue where he would have made any admissions to her, she cannot afford to put him on the stand to subject him to that sort of cross-examination. That's why I'm saying I think it's unlikely. He can still enamor the public with his pretty hair and his sweater vests and his letters from prison and all of that. I think people already love him. I don't know that that's going to make that much of a difference.
So this is kind of, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit on that. This was a funny comment somebody made, and it's just, I found it kind of humorous. So at one point they said that in Luigi Mangione's backpack in Altoona was about $8,000 US and $2,000 in foreign currency or something like that. And someone said, if that arrest turns out to be illegal, does Luigi get that money? Because if they planted it on it, did he just get richer by the arrest because it wasn't even, because he even said, that's not my money. I don't know where that money came from. That was one of the only things he said in court, which is I don't know where that money came. That wasn't in my bag. So they're like, well, hey, maybe he'll just get richer because they're going to have to give him his money back if they think it's his money.
Usually there's what we call forfeiture proceedings where the state will file a civil complaint. It's the people or the government versus the actual amount of currency, and they'll try to seize that in civil proceedings. So I would imagine that there would probably be a forfeiture complaint, or maybe if he gets found not guilty in all three cases, that'll end up back in his property bag. I think he should take it and run. I'm kidding. The defense can't lie, but the prosecution can. Yep, it's kind of like you can't lie to the cops because it's a crime, but the cops can lie to you, and they do it all the time. Do you think the federal trial will go first? I think it should. I think Karen's got a good argument for it, and I think just statistically, federal trials usually move faster. Their dockets move faster, but they're going to fight it. They're going to want that state trial to go first so that they can try twice. What's the episode? I don't know. Readers on revealed during. Nope. If there's new evidence revealed during the trial, we have a problem. The government has committed a discovery violation, and that could be grounds for disagreement or exclusion of the evidence by the judge. Is there any technicality that can get him off before trial? Possibly. I mean, Karen A. has already raised several issues in her motion to dismiss. I don't know that a judge will dismiss for any one of those things or all of them in the aggregate, but it is possible. I feel like I'm missing some of them because they're kind of coming in fast.
They're going fast. Yeah, they're hitting you fast.
Why wasn't this case double jeopardy? Great question. Because the federal government and the state government have what's called concurrent jurisdiction, and they also are separate sovereigns. That means that a person can violate a law or can have conduct that is illegal under state law and also simultaneously illegal under federal law. Separate sovereigns, they can both prosecute the person for the same course of conduct. The only thing they can't do is retry. A state cannot retry a person. Feds cannot retry a person if they've been acquitted in their first trial. Is Luigi going to be in Metro Detention Center till December? Yes. No chance he's getting a bond. Can they offer an alternative suspect during the trial? Oh, this is good. So again, not licensed in New York. I want to just give that disclaimer. In South Carolina, we have a prohibition against what's called the assertion of third-party guilt. We cannot actually point to a third party in a trial and say, we didn't do it, but somebody else did, unless we have actual evidence of that person's guilt. I don't know, and I'll have to look into this. That'd be a good follow-up question as to whether New York State or the feds have the same rule. Did they ever explain how they found one bag in CPUC and again on him? I don't know. Aaron wins. Does he get transferred to state prison? Yep. Well, yeah, he would. They'd probably send him to Rikers.
Right. There was actually a moment when we were discussing the possibility that Karen was okay with allowing the federal government to retain custody of him, because in order to be remanded into the state custody means he goes to Rikers, and she didn't want him in Rikers. And so that was part of the reason why. I want to say one more thing real quick. I did tell my guest that we would keep her about an hour. She's a busy woman, and I don't want to keep her here forever. So it's up to you, Allie, on how many questions you want to answer. But we're at the 1 hour mark. So how are you feeling?
I can do some more. It's fine.
Okay, go for it.
I feel like I missed a couple. Let's see. Do I believe he's guilty of the crime? Whoa, I do not have sufficient information to draw that kind of conclusion. I will say this. I've seen a lot of problems in the federal prosecution and in the state prosecution that I think that Karen A. has already done a really good job of raising and just kind of sowing those seeds of reasonable doubt. I think that if you look at this case objectively, it might seem like, oh my gosh, we've got a murder on video, it's hopeless. But she's done such a good job of just kind of poking at the little things and kind of sowing those seeds of reasonable doubt. So I think it'll be a defensible case for her. But will he win? I don't know, because I haven't seen all the evidence. Can the state case be dropped if Karen wins the federal case? It can. I don't think it will. I think they'll be madder than hornets, and they'll try to get him. If he wins that one, I missed it. Do you think he would plea? It's possible. Normally when you have a death penalty case, there's always a distinct possibility that the prosecutor will come and say, if you plead to life without parole, we'll take the death penalty off the table. I don't see that happening here, just because I think the whole reason they pursued the federal case in the first place was so that they could get to the death penalty. I think they've kind of staked their territory on that. They're not going to back down. This is the craziest case you've ever seen. It's pretty crazy. Really, the craziest thing about it to me is just how much the public is enamored with Luigi. Gosh, I wish people loved my clients as much. Half of them. Do you think the family or friends will be called to the stand? So if Luigi does not testify, then I think no, because anytime the defense puts up a case, they're forfeiting their right to have last argument in front of the jury typically, and you're not going to present character evidence normally unless you have a really good reason to. Everybody knows your mama and your pastor and your best friend love you. You don't get a whole lot of bang for your buck from putting up that kind of testimony in a trial. The jury doesn't really care that your mama loves you. Do you think that they were planning to choose death penalty before Pam got involved? No. I think that's all Pam and Donald. The most realistic scenario for Luigi, life with parole? Not necessarily. I mean, again, I think he's got a chance of a hung jury. There's always the possibility that he gets acquitted. I mean, it's an uphill battle, no doubt, but I don't think hope is lost. Do you think any request to dismiss evidence or charges in any of the 3 cases will be granted? I don't know the answer. That's a good question. I don't know. I don't think the case will be dismissed, but I do think that the defense has a chance to win some of the evidentiary or exclusion arguments, certain pieces of evidence that maybe the jury will not allow that the judge will not allow the jury to consider. Can they suppress Karen speaking about the healthcare industry? Going back to what we were talking about, will the judge even allow them to put up that type of defense? I think that's going to be a battle. Assuming that's the direction Karen's going to go in, I think that'll be a battle. No TV. Yeah, that's really unfortunate. We can't watch it on TV. It's federal. Oh, thank you. Ryan's wife and son to trial for sympathy points. They have a right to be there. States usually have in the state constitutions and sometimes by statute, Victims' Rights Acts, they have a right to be present for any and every proceeding, including like preliminary hearings, pretrial hearings. I don't believe it's been reported that they've been to any of those thus far, but I would imagine that they may want to attend trial, but it's sympathy points or not, they have a right as victims to be present. With possible paroles, it's very difficult to actually get parole. Yeah, it is really hard actually. There's no parole in the federal system. The feds abolished parole, I think, in the late 80s. So you serve your time, you serve 85% of any time that you get in federal prison. And then it's usually followed by a period of what's called supervised release. But we abolished parole in the federal system back in the 80s. Do you think all these scared witnesses get to stay anonymous? I don't know. What are we talking about with the scared witnesses?
So there was a moment when the prosecutions tried to indicate that there was witnesses they didn't want to identify because they were afraid for their life, that they were afraid that Luigi Mangione fans were going to take them out for testifying against their boy, kind of thing is what the allegation was. And there was a moment where they were given X number of time to either come forward and submit a request to hide the identities of these witnesses or not. And I don't think they did that.
Okay, I haven't heard that. Okay, interesting. If they're witnesses and they testify, they're going to be out there. They're not going to be able to hide or testify in private. If you're going to take the stand, you've got to testify in front of everybody. So they can choose not to come forward. But if they do come forward and they get subpoenaed to testify at trial, it's going to be in front of a full courtroom. You think they really gave him a laptop to review discovery? Yeah, probably. I mean, it happens all the time. It happens in facilities. He's got a right to participate in his own defense. I love that they would have given him a laptop because otherwise somebody's got to sit there and read everything to him page by page.
Can I interrupt with a question there? Luigi's gotten kind of popular for having a letter log where he's documenting everyone who writes to him and giving their initials and whatever, and allegedly writing back to people. What is if you're an attorney, do you want your client writing to people, and who reviews his outgoing letters to make sure he doesn't say something that's going to hurt his own case?
Yeah. So unfortunately, nobody's reading his outgoing letters to make sure he doesn't hurt his own case. Hopefully he's listening very closely to Karen about what he should or shouldn't discuss or talk about. And if he wants to respond to fan mail and say thank you and I appreciate you and talk about the weather, he can. But the detention center is monitoring all of his outgoing mail. They're reading it and to make sure that he's not, sending stuff to people or communicating or reading his incoming and outgoing mail, but they're not doing that for the purpose of making sure that he's not harming his case. He's going to have to lean on his lawyers, and his lawyers, I hope, I'm sure that they've advised him of that, and I hope that he's listening to them. Not to say anything stupid, that somebody can come forward and decide they want to write a book. I forgot who that happened to. That happened to somebody.
Well, not only that, but I don't want to take away from the questions, but if he allegedly did write in a notebook, right? His handwriting's there. And now if he's writing letters to people, they could use the handwriting analysis to say, look, this is Luigi's handwriting. He's admitted to it. It's his notebook. And they can't go for that notebook wasn't even written by him kind of defense. So I don't know.
Actually, I think that was one of the Menendez brothers, wasn't it? He had like a girlfriend on the outside and he confessed to her in some writings or on some tapes. And then she went right to the DA with it. Good idea. Find something else to talk about. Improve the stalking if Brian Thompson was not fearing for his life. No personal security hired. My understanding is that they're saying that in order for Luigi to have known that Brian Thompson was going to use that particular entrance, be at that particular hotel at a particular time, that there was a certain amount of planning involved in that. Beyond that, a lot of the, so grand jury transcripts we're not going to be able to see, so we don't know what was presented to support those stalking charges. But I think those, out of all of them, might be a little iffy.
I need to ask you a question because I meant to ask this earlier, and I don't know if we have time, but before the shooter is seen on a cell phone. And I jokingly all the time say he's not calling in a pizza. So the question is there an accomplice? Because again, I don't know that the shooter did this alone. There was a lot of planning involved in this. Maybe if Luigi's even involved, he may not have been the trigger man. He might have been involved in some, or whoever the shooter is. I want to know that phone call. Now, obviously by now the prosecution knows who that phone call is, but we haven't heard anything about it. But that phone call is sus to me, that there was somebody that he was talking to moments before Brian Thompson shows up, maybe on the inside of the hotel saying Brian's on his way out the lobby, whatever. So there could be somebody else out there.
Yeah, could be. Or, the prosecution may try to establish an alibi too. There's never know. But I'm sure they've got those phone records by now and they know exactly who he's talking to. And I bet you the FBI or whoever has paid that person a visit or at least tried to. If he was on the phone trying to look normal, possible. Has to be an accomplice. Yeah. Looks like two people think that maybe he was just trying to blend in. The thing is, it's like, really, I can say this, I'm from New York. It's New York. Nobody pays attention to people anyway. They want to be left alone. Don't look at me. Don't talk to me.
I kind of like jokingly refer to the woman that's drinking a coffee right next to the shooting when it happens. And they're kind of like, oops, I got to move on down the street. Like it's literally like, oh.
That's so New York. God, that's so New York. Interesting they didn't leak the phone call and the dot. Yeah. I mean, hell, they've leaked a whole bunch of other stuff. And to be on the phone when anxious in public so many times. Girl, me too. If she had an alibi, would Karen have presented already? Nope. You'd probably save that for trial, but there's a notice requirement. If you're intending to offer an alibi, you have to disclose that to the prosecution within a certain period of time prior to trial.
That's another question I was going to have. Like this is going to sound really conspiracy theory, right? I'm going to warn you right now. So if Luigi, for example, wasn't the shooter, and let's say there was a 3D printed gun, as I pointed out, you could print a multiple 3D printed guns. So maybe Luigi has a 3D printed gun, but maybe not the one used in the commission of the crime. If his fingerprints aren't on that weapon at the crime, and they can prove that that was the weapon used in the commission, what happens to the trial if, for example, they say, well, now we know Luigi didn't pull the trigger, but he was still involved. It changes from murder to accomplice to murder. Does that start the whole trial over again for accomplice, or do they just keep going and just kind of change the charges mid-fly and say, okay, now it's accomplice to murder? How's that work?
I don't think that they would concede that just because his fingerprints weren't on the gun that he wasn't the trigger man. I think they could say he could have, been wearing gloves. He could have cleaned it off. I mean, I don't think that they are going to change their position just because of that. Estimated cost of a case like this, expensive. I would say I would be surprised if the family has not paid Karen upwards of $1 million or more.
Well, you bring up a really good question because everybody has asked, where's the money coming from? We don't know that his family's paying for his defense. The family's been quiet about the whole thing. They haven't said anything publicly. And a lot of people have been saying, why isn't his family stepping up? Why aren't they coming to his defense? Who's paying for his defense? Do we know who's paying for his defense?
We don't, but I mean, I can't say I blame the family for not wanting to, they probably are trying to live in peace, and they're, they've lost their son. I'm going to say, it sounds very dramatic, like he's dead, but they've lost their son. Their son is fighting for his life. They probably want some privacy and some truth. My understanding is they're a pretty well-to-do family in that Maryland community. I don't know, but
what do you think about the $1 million that's been raised by citizens coming to just donate $30,000 at a time for his defense?
Love to see it. That's great.
So, yeah, so I don't want to keep you too long. Are you good? You want to wrap up at this point, or how you feeling?
Sure. Yeah, I can keep going if people have more.
Hey, as long as you're willing to answer questions, you are on. Keep going.
Could be a pro bono aspect. His hobby is making a ton from Diddy. Yeah. Lawyers, we don't like working for free, especially not for celebrities. Like, no, they got paid. Donating is a way to show this. Yeah. Would you advise a client's family to keep distance? I think I would, especially in this scenario. If I were representing Luigi, I would encourage the family to keep their circle tight. I would encourage the family to stay off of social media. I would encourage them not to make public statements. I think Karen has done such a good job of balancing not saying too much and making it look like she's trying to try the case in the media, but also threading the needle of making sure that people are aware of what's going on. There's always a reason for what she does. She's not just out there talking because she wants to hear the sound of her own voice. There's a reason for what she's doing. I think she's brilliant. But in terms of the family, I think that's exactly the way that I would handle it. I don't know if they're doing that at her direction or not. Maybe they just want privacy, but I think it would be best for the family to kind of stay and sit tight, at least for now. Karen's doing great. I agree. She's a rock star. His legal fund goes up to $50 million. I made a comment on Luigi's birthday that wouldn't it be poetic for his legal fund to make it to the total amount of 1 year's worth of Brian Thompson's United Healthcare. $110 million. Of course, people like skewered me for saying that. And I'm like, listen, I just said it would be poetic. I just don't come at me. Right. Interesting. So he's raised $1 million thus far. It's not outside the realm of possibility it could get to that point. How do you think of how they handle the PR versus the PR lady? What? Oh my goodness. What if he runs out of money to pay his team? I think crowdsourcing's got that covered. Extremely poetic. I think so too. Why is the acquitted decision not an option for the case at the end of the trial? It is. They can still find him not guilty. What do you make of the continuance filed in Pennsylvania today? I looked earlier today. I heard something was coming down the pipeline, but I haven't seen it. So I don't want to talk about it if I haven't seen it. It's too late to claim mental health defense. No, I don't think he's crazy though. And I don't think that's the direction they're going. What if the prosecution finds them in another place the shooting happened when trial continued? Yeah, I think the defense would offer that as an alibi. I don't know that that would necessarily stop the state or the feds from pursuing the case against him. She has a part in the heart letters. Oh, I heard about the heart letters in the socks. How long is jury selection? Whew, jury selection will be a long time. So you got to think about it in terms of this. So Diddy's jury selection started on Monday. They're saying that they should have had a jury seated by close of business today. I haven't seen the news or anything, but they're supposed to start opening statements on Monday. It's going to be even longer for Luigi because it's a death penalty case and they have to have a death qualified jury, which is going to take extra time. And all of that doesn't even take into consideration the amount of time that the potential jurors have to spend filling out the questionnaires. In federal court, they actually send you a questionnaire in the mail, and it's very invasive. It's like, do you have bumper stickers on your car? What do they say? Have you ever donated to this cause or that cause? What radio shows do you listen to? It's really interesting. So not even taking into consideration the amount of time people spend on that in court jury selection, I think it'll take weeks.
I don't like to be political, but somebody asked the question about, Trump and this administration. Is it possible you see a scenario in which he's convicted under the Trump administration and then another administration pardons him later and says, look, this was an overzealous administration and anything like that?
It's possible. I think if there's anything we've learned over the last couple of years, is a pardon is always possible. That's a lightning rod, though. Man, that's a political lightning rod. I don't care who you are. If he gets convicted by a jury, for a president to come in and to go against what a jury's decision was, I think that'd be tough. I don't think it's possible, but I think it'd be tough. I think most people are, they want to respect a jury's decision. A lot of the people that were pardoned recently may have been pleas or, other forms of conviction in federal court. I mean, if he was found guilty by a jury, I think that'd be, I don't know, unlikely. Yours? Well, I think people are talking to each other.
By the way, before Allie does get out of here, please make sure you have liked and followed her account if you haven't done so already. You probably should have done that a long time ago, but make sure you are following her account while she's here, and she's easy to click on, and you can follow her account. So make sure you do that right now.
What we learned about the missing months he was Will we learn about the missing months he was gone in trial? I'm not sure. You might have to clarify that one for me. I'm not sure what you're asking. What's your opinion on Judge Carroll? Don't know the judge. Hopefully fair, and we'll listen. Already following. Thank you. Luigi's cousin. That was like one of my favorite things early on when I first started talking about this case. I think it's because we both have like a very distinct beauty market. We're both Italian. So people are like, "Is he your cousin?" But I do have a million cousins. Oh! I see what you're saying. When he was missing, maybe.
Yeah, a lot of people make a big deal out of the fact that he seemed to kind of go off the radar from his own family for about 6 months, and they're like, no Italian son's going to be along or missing from his mama for 6 months and not talk. So there's all this talk of what was he doing for the 6 months? Was he preparing for this? Was he being trained for this? You know, what was Luigi doing for 6 months?
His mama got a hold of him. She probably wanted to beat his ass with a wooden spoon. People think he was homeless. He's having personal issues. Well, maybe, or maybe he just wanted to be left alone, have some peace. Maybe he was having a Dave Chappelle moment. He wanted to return to the homeland and be quiet.
Well, and honestly, that's what I've said before about the false identification. Is maybe he didn't want his family reaching him just for maybe he wanted a break. He just wanted to not be found for a while. So who knows? But.
His friends and girlfriend during that time. Yeah. I don't know. We may never know the answer to that question. What girlfriend? Uh-oh.
All the women are like, wait a minute.
Lady. Okay. Plenty of Luigi to go around. Oh, that's funny. That might be my favorite comment of the day, actually. I love that. Tell me now. Who decides which trial goes first? Prosecutors get to decide. They'll call their case. I think the Manhattan DA's office and the feds will get together. I don't know if they'll rock, paper, scissors for it or what, but they'll get to make that decision.
It's funny watching the women defend Luigi. When there was a moment in the when Karen was pointing out that an officer grabbed Luigi by the wrist, they're like, "You don't touch my Luigi!"
Very, very defensive indeed. Yes, that's so funny. And judges how judges? Yes, judges can dismiss cases. How is upon motion of a party. So just like Karen has filed a motion to dismiss, the judge can grant that motion, grant the relief she's requesting. I think that's probably unlikely at this point based on what I've seen and read. But yes, the judge can, and the way that it's done procedurally is upon motion of the defendant, which is just a request to the court with some legal basis. Let me see this. Whoa, you guys are in deep, man. I don't know. This is a lot. It would be amazing if the judge did. Yes, I agree. We just need much love. Did he get treated for his back and MDC? They do have a responsibility to provide him with medical care. I don't know the specifics of his particular medical situation, but the jail does have to care for him and pay for it. I do remember that, right? Though he had some sort of a really debilitating back injury.
Yeah, a spondy injury from a surfing accident allegedly, and supposedly he had surgery, and the surgery went well, and he was kind of pain-free, and things were good. But
I'd be surprised if they were giving him proper physical therapy in there. Certainly not like what he would get if he was out on bond, but they do have the responsibility to provide reasonable medical care. He gets free health care. I don't know if it's free. I mean, he gets health care. Trust me, you don't want jail health care. It's better than nothing, but it ain't great. They can also, if he is currently insured, let's see, how old is he? No, he's too old now. Under Obamacare, he's not insured by his parents anymore, but if he would have been under a policy, they can seek payment from his current policy, but they do have a responsibility to pay for it. It'll be Medicaid. I think he has a chance of a fair trial. Oh, I I have great faith in the system. I like to believe that he has a chance at a fair trial. I'm very disturbed by the things I've seen thus far. I'll say that. Yep, he turned 27 on the 6th. The day that his crowdsourced legal fund hit $1 million. What a birthday present. I guess he's got to be in jail. That's at least good news. Do you think his trials will be in 2026? Yep, I do. How long before he goes to trial? So the federal case, I believe that there is a pretrial conference on the 5th. That's the date that the parties will get together and decide what day jury selection will start. And then typically in federal court, jury selection rolls right into trial.
That's December 5th that they're going to make the decision, right?
Yeah. Do you know when they're looking to start trial? No, but we'll know more towards the end of the year. And all parties will have some input on that, but the judge is not going to let them get away with dragging it out too long. Cases can take years and years, especially on the state level. And especially a death penalty case. I've got to say, like, this is the most complicated type of case that there is. And they take a long time. And you've got to think about it, it's actually 2 trials. You've got the guilt phase and the penalty phase. They're going to take long with selecting the jury. It'll be a long jury selection. I agree with that. Not just because it's a death penalty case, but because of all of the questions they're going to have to ask people to ensure that they're able to be fair and impartial. To use testimony from the letters. Luana, what letters are you talking about?
I think she means fan letters that are being written in. Well, all the people who are saying, hey, because of you, this, that, and then,
I don't know what she'd want to use that for. So any evidence has to be relevant in order to be admissible. So it would have to be tied to some theory of the case or some issue in order for the judge to allow it in under the rules of evidence. Do you think they're advising the family not to show up for court? Don't know. I don't know the answer to that. They may just want privacy. You got to figure if they show their face, people start figuring out who they are. They could end up getting harassed or doxxed or a number of things. They probably just want some peace.
I don't know if you saw the question from Just Curious. Do you have any insights into Avi Moskowitz, the death penalty specialist they have in the case?
Yeah, no. So that's what you do when you have a death penalty case. I actually have one of my own going on right now here in South Carolina. Is you hire counsel specifically experienced in death penalty cases. My understanding was he was appointed in that capacity. I do not know him. I know him by reputation. But my understanding is that he will be a equal member of the defense team advising. Karen's still the lead attorney on the case, but he was brought in as death counsel. What are you disturbed about regarding the case? So much. So much. Mostly lying like their pants are on fire about all sorts of stupid stuff they don't need to be lying about. I'm disturbed by the fact that I feel like they're using the federal system to get to the death penalty just to prove a political point. I'm disturbed that they're lying about the oopsies or the mistakes or the outright nefarious actions they're taking. I'm disturbed by how law enforcement push a narrative.
I'll tell you something I'm disturbed about is Karen's opening line in the 57 pages, which was like 377 people were murdered in New York last year, but we only seem to care about this one because he's a CEO. Why is we're not supposed to pay attention to who you are, and that makes a difference on how vigorously we go after somebody. So what does his being a CEO have anything to do with anything,
And to the point that I've heard again from people, what about all the school shooters out there that have killed kids? More lawyers will be added to his legal defense. Yeah, I think that's possible. I still think my girl, Queen Karen, is going to run the show, but I do think it's possible they'll add more people. I mean, just look at Diddy, for example. I think he's had almost a dozen in total. I think that it's possible they'll add several more. Just over the high schools we're going after. Disturbing indeed. I agree. Is he owed any compensation? Get compensation and walks were found innocent for all the time in jail. No. So in order to prevail in a civil action for malicious prosecution, you have to be able to prove that there was no probable cause to make the arrest in the first place. It's pretty hard to do. Probable cause is such a low burden. Anything's possible. You can sue. I think recovery is unlikely. Be inspired. You're always going to have people acting crazy, saying that inspire them, and they use it as an excuse for bad behavior. The federal case to go first. Will the state case be paused? He won't. He probably will not be required to make any state court appearances, and not. I say probably. He won't. He has the same lawyer in both cases, and so Karen will be in trial, and so nothing will happen in the state case. I think, you know, discovery won't be paused. If for some reason they're still trying to turn over evidence at that point, they'll still have a responsibility to do a rolling production and provide that material to them. But Karen will be busy in trial, preparing for that trial, and so I think it'll be quiet in the state case while that's happening.
Real quick, Natasha Johnson, I did see the headlines today about the United Healthcare being sued by stockholders. That's a freaking fascinating story. Too much for tonight, but I plan on making a video about that coming up.
All right, guys, now when I'm looking, you guys stop. But when I'm talking, rolling in so fast, I think wins against the federal and state cases. Does he only have Pennsylvania case? Yes. So he's got 3 cases in total: the state case in New York, federal case in the Southern District of New York, and the case in Pennsylvania. Case in Pennsylvania is the least of his worries. But yeah, if both the New York cases are gone, then he's just got to deal with PA. I worry about his safety. Yeah, I mean, jail, detention centers are scary places. He's pretty. Jail's not a nice place, but, you know, hopefully he is in a place where he is safe and he knows how to handle himself. And I have a feeling that because he's kind of a high-profile defendant, that the detention center might be taking extra steps to make sure that he's secure. Will they call?
Yeah, Jessica Tisch. Will they call Jessica Tisch to trial? That's an interesting question.
I don't think so, but she does like to talk a lot. I think that got her in trouble. The suspicion alone and valid reason. Oh, shoot, I lost it. He waived speedy trial. Not to my knowledge, no. Whose corporate suspension is? I think he is in general population or isolated. I don't know. The commissary cell decent skincare. You know what? It looks like it. I actually did. One of my very first posts about Luigi Mangione was, how the heck does somebody look like that after they've been in jail? My clients do not look like that, nor do they look like they smell like that. I'm telling you, I think he's made a deal with the devil of some. Nobody. Hair care for those bouncing curls. Yes, go back to my profile and look. It's like one of my earliest posts where I'm like, somebody is sneaking some Miss Jessie's curl cream into the Metro Detention Center because there's no other explanation for that hair. You think the COs are helping him out? I mean, I don't know. Hopefully they're not doing anything illegal. You guys are funny. Thank you. And on point for every hearing. Yeah, I mean, and part of that I think is intentional on Karen's part. Like, she's not going to allow him to look troubled and crazy, because when you have an image that's put out there to the public, it's part of why people are not forced to come to court in their jail jumpsuits that you get to wear street clothes, is so that you're not putting out, you know, subconsciously that this is an inmate or this is a person detained or this is a criminal. So the image is very important. I think all of that is very intentional on Karen's part. I don't think that's an accident. I think it probably comes very easy to somebody like him, but I do think that there's some effort being put in there on purpose. Complete self-defense because denials were killing thousands. Yeah, I mean, we talked about that earlier. I think that's an unconventional argument, but just like the Menendez brothers argued imperfect self-defense, when they shot their dad, I think it's possible that they can make that type of an argument here. I don't know how much leeway the judge will give them.
You know, if along that lines, if it did become a self-defense or defense of others type thing, that's the only situation where I can see there's a possibility of putting, quote unquote, the healthcare system on trial, right? Because you have to make the argument, what was he fighting against? Who was he protecting against? And then the healthcare system gets on trial.
And I think that's where you get more and more blatant about that actually being your objective, I think is where they're going to get a lot of pushback from the judge, because they're going to be like, whoa, 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 we've devolved into something, you know, more philosophical than tangible. And this is a case of murder. And we're going to deal with one perpetrator and one victim. I think they'll get pushback on that. I think the discovery of the lobbyist constitution will be granted to Karen. I don't know what that's asking. Is he in the shoe? I haven't heard that.
I don't think so.
Shouldn't be, absent some like security concern or disciplinary issue. Those special housing units are like hell. Either maybe he's with Diddy. He's sure not sharing for products. I can tell you. Retry him in the event of retry him in the event of a not guilty verdict. No, they cannot. Not guilty is not guilty. Can't be retried.
A lot of people have been asking, I don't know if you've seen it, but a lot of people keep asking, if for some reason Luigi Mangione is found not guilty, can he sue for the way that they treated him and did the things that they've done to him during this trial in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah, but again, going for malicious prosecution is tricky. He's got to be able to prove there was no probable cause to begin with. That's hard. It's hard to do. I get that question a lot from clients. Like, if my case gets dismissed or I get found not guilty, do I get my money back for what I paid you? Do I get my money back for, losing my job while I was in jail? And that's where the criminal system and the civil system are so different. The prevailing party does not get to recover costs in a criminal case the way that they do in a civil case.
Well, let me throw you this question though along that lines. I don't know if it's all states, but at least where the state where I'm at, if you win a self-defense, you are not entitled to pay for your defense in a self-defense case. There was some kind of provision that says you don't have to pay for your trial if it was a self-defense case. Now, I don't know who that defaults then to paying for it, but that was some kind of provision I heard. But.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that would be my next question. Who pays for it? What state is that? That's interesting.
Washington State was where I was at when I read that law. Now I'm in Oregon now, so I should have clarified that. But Washington State, I heard that if you get basically a self-defense case, you cannot be forced to pay for your own defense in a self-defense case. Like
meaning if you prevail in the case because of a self-defense argument? Interesting.
Yeah, okay. But I don't know.
I'll have to look at that. That's interesting. You didn't do it. I think Luigi's got more admirers than Charles Manson. They just keep going. They can. You get one hung jury, they'll try again. You get two, they start getting kind of tired. And then it's a matter of finances, too. This is going to be a really expensive case for the government. And at a certain point, they have to look at what is, realistically, do we need to continue to spend taxpayer dollars on this case when two juries have been unable to come to a unanimous decision? And I think they'll get a lot of blowback if they try to do it a third time. This is going to be an expensive case. And I think the taxpayers, especially in New York, are going to be ticked off if that's something that they decide to do.
It's funny that you said that because I don't have legal experience like you do, but that was my statement too, is if they had a hung jury, I imagine they'll try one more time. And while they might be allowed to do it as many times as they want to, at some point it's going to become a waste of taxpayers' money. And so I can't imagine it going to a third time if there was two hung juries, but that was my guess.
I agree with you there. Jury nullification lawyers will even do anything? Yeah, I think it's possible. I think people are already in a little bit of a jury nullification mindset, right? You've got some people who don't think he did it or they think it's the wrong guy, but then you've got some people who think that Luigi was the shooter. He did do it, but that he was justified. And so that's already like the beginning of a jury nullification mindset. So yeah, I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility. I think a lot of people are already there in their minds. What happens if they just give up after two hung juries? They dismiss the case.
Unfortunately, in that situation, however, it's sorry, I just wasted 5 years of your life thing during the trial. They're not going to pay him for the lost time that he had. It's just going to be like, hey, sorry, I guess you get to walk free, but we can't give you 5 years or 6 years of your life back.
He doesn't even get a lollipop and an apology at that point. He gets nothing. They're worried about the cost of trial, especially if they're yeah, I mean, I hear you, but I think the third go around they would be, because there'd be some serious blowback. Will he get to wear regular clothes? Regular clothes, yes, because we do not want the jury or the public to see him or to be biased against him while he's wearing that prison jumpsuit. That's a big deal. Can a judge overturn nullification? Nope, a judge is going to, unless there's something outrageous about the jury verdict. Juries get the final say. Can they sue him? Yes, and I'm sure they will. Now, it'll be a stronger case if he's convicted, but they can bring that suit for sure. Now, Luigi Mangione personally probably does not have the ability to satisfy a monetary judgment. I'm sure his family does, but him personally, I don't know what kind of assets he has, but they can bring a civil suit. Does anything stay on his record if there's jury nullification? So when you say jury nullification, if you're saying that the jury is kind of disregarding the facts or the evidence and voting to acquit him, then no, he will not have that on his record because he will be acquitted, and that will not go on his record as a conviction. What about that document of him just speculates that he's suing someone? I don't know about that. I've not heard that one. Would we hear about a civil suit if it happens? Yeah, probably. I would imagine that would make the news. It's also public record, depending on where they would file it.
It's kind of what happened with the O.J. Simpson, right? The family went after O.J. for a civil suit after the jury found him not guilty.
Oh, apparently there was a billboard in Times Square. Hey, maybe the same guy that's driving the truck is responsible for that billboard.
Probably.
Somebody saw it. So yeah. People coming in, we're almost done, guys. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to go look. I do want to see that. Okay, very unserious question. Oh boy, I'm here for it. What is it? Oops. Oh, I don't know anything about that document. How long will the state wait to go to trial after the Fed case is done? Good question. They should be, heck, with as much time as it's going to take to bring that federal case to trial, if the state's not ready by then, I don't know what the heck they're doing, sitting around with their thumbs up their, what's-is. So hopefully it should be pretty soon thereafter. Now, if he gets convicted in the federal case and he gets sentenced either to life without parole, I will be curious to see whether whether the state actually still pursues the case. It's like, for what? I guess to make it, if he wins on appeal, to make it appeal proof to where there's like a backup life sentence. That might be one reason why they would do it. And in the event that his federal conviction was overturned, they'd want to make sure they still couldn't get out of prison if they got a conviction in the state case. They were teasing me with the very unserious question. I was here for that. What's the very
I know. I was waiting for it too.
What is it? Why are U.S. proceeding so long in ghetto? Because that's just how we roll. No, I mean, okay, in all fairness, I feel like most federal cases are actually quite efficient. I prefer practicing in federal court to state court. It's just neater, cleaner, more organized. The thing about the feds is they investigate their cases on the front end rather than the back end. By the time a case makes it to a criminal complaint or an indictment, the feds have already done all of their work, and usually the discovery material is ready for them to turn over immediately. And it's not like the police continuing to bumble through an investigation while your client's out on bond. But it's not perfect, but it is, a very good.
My friend Just Curious, I think she caught the same thing I did. So your unserious question was, they want a hair and makeup tutorial from you, is what they want. Can they get a hair and makeup tutorial?
Yes, I'll do a legal get ready with me. Oh God. They said, would you like to see him on The Bachelor? Now that would be a plot twist, but I wonder if they would let him do it from the jail. will have any problems finding a woman. I really don't. Thank you guys. That's very sweet. I guess they have the Golden Bachelor, some other kind of bachelor. We'd have to come up with like a really creative name for like when the bachelor is detained at the Metro Detention Center. You guys got to help us come up with something funny. I love your TSA. Listen, I'm lobbying for that for real. I don't like to get felt up when I have to go inside the prison. Convicted, would he stay at MDC or transfer somewhere else? He would get transferred somewhere else. He would go to prison. So detention centers are jails. They're people who are being held pre-trial. If you are convicted, you are sent to a prison, which is the New York State Department of Corrections. Or no, sorry, Bureau of Prisons.
I had a question that somebody just brought up again. So, you know, Altoona, Pennsylvania has this case for the gun charges and the false ID and stuff like that. And there was a moment where Thomas Dickey said, I want to request that my client not have to do Zoom calls. If you're going to have him in court, then he needs to be able to be in court in person. And then that leads to the question, does that mean if the federal government has him in custody, they need to pay for transporting him to Pennsylvania to appear for his court appearances?
Marshal Service is responsible for him. He's in the U.S. custody of the U.S. Marshals, and they're responsible for getting him where he needs to go. They got plenty of money. They can do it. Yeah. Transportation was my next question. Yeah. How common is it for multiple person? Not common in a murder at all. In fact, never heard of such a thing before. In drug cases and in gun cases, it happens all the time where someone will get charged with trafficking a drug or being in possession of a stolen weapon, for example, and they'll be charged by the state, and the feds will come in and adopt the case, or they might be charged by the feds and the state chooses to bring charges. But normally the state prosecutor and the federal prosecutor will get together and decide who gets to keep it. I've never seen somebody be prosecuted in both for a murder. Wild. Again, going to the whole theory of the only reason they're doing that is so they can get to the death penalty. They wouldn't otherwise be able to do it. It's a total political move, in my humble opinion. Do you have any examples, cases we can look up? You mean of like concurrent state and federal jurisdiction?
I think that's what they were asking, yeah.
Yeah. So cases are not reported for public consumption unless they're appealed. So cases that go to the state and federal appellate court and then the Supreme Court of the United States or Supreme Court or highest court in New York State is the Court of Appeals. So you can't actually go through and read about cases unless they are on appeal. You can look in public record, but they're not reported to the legal reporters until and unless they come up on appeal.
Real quick, a few people have mentioned they're getting in late and they're frustrated. Yes, this will be uploaded to YouTube if this doesn't get shut off. So as long as we don't say anything stupid and get banned and they don't let me download it, I will be downloading this after Ali and I are done, and I will be uploading it to YouTube. So if you missed it, you can watch from the very beginning. So thanks for asking.
Hopefully I wasn't the one that said anything stupid.
No, you're good.
Can we do this again when trial starts? Heck yeah. All right, guys, you always stop when I stop talking. Then when I start talking and answering a question, you're going to hit us with 10 more in a row that we can't see because they scroll up every day of job. Don't mention Bondi. Yeah, that's probably true. Maybe we shouldn't say her name.
I actually had a 1 week suspension. I was in the middle of talking about Pam Bondi and Karen's response, and I got shut off and lost rights for a week for talking about it. Now, I don't know if it was something else that happened. But that's when I got shut off.
Got nicknames for her. She's Dark DOJ Oprah, and she's White House Nancy Grace. That's what we call her.
To be fair, I say all kinds of stuff people say I can't say on TikTok, and I get away with it on a regular basis. So we're good. We're all right.
Do you think the people can actually be suppressed? It's possible. Oh, I lost one of them. How high are the chances of percentage of proving stalking? I think I will have a better idea of what my answer to that question might be once we get a better idea of what the evidence is. That one's tricky. That's going to be really evidence specific. How often do you think Karen sees Luigi? I don't know the answer to that. I can tell you that I will not go more than 30 days without laying eyes on a detained client, but that's just a personal preference. They hear from me more than that, but whether it's a video visit or an in-person visit, I won't let them go 30 days without hearing from me. Obviously, it's a lot more than that when there's hearings and things coming up. So I'm sure he's probably heard from her and been with her a good bit over the last couple of weeks. There's been a lot of activity. He's considering suspension. Oh, we have a bear.
That bear was awesome.
I lost the question. Would Karen have any other cases she's also working on? Oh, I'm sure. Chris, a bad sketch artist. Oh, you don't think he's as pretty in his pictures as he is in real life? I hope Karen saw him on his birthday. I bet you she probably did. Visited him weekly. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was at least that.
You know, it's funny. I digress for a moment, and see, I got to watch myself so I don't get kicked off TikTok. So this is one of the things about his looks that has kind of, if this became about the healthcare system, and if Luigi actually did it, and his defense is, hey, I'm looking out for the little guy. It seems like, in a way, we're almost doing a disjustice for him, making it about how hot he is and how everybody wants to marry him, because it's becoming about the man and not the message. But is it also maybe what makes it a good thing, because his looks are helping it get national attention? Like, how does his looks factor into his defense?
So I will tell you this. I think if he looked like an ogre, we would not be sitting here having this conversation. That being said, I agree with you that I think constantly turning the conversation to how attractive he is does detract from any potential message. If that was, and I can't speak for him, obviously, we don't know that he was the right person. We don't know that he did it, and we don't know if he did it, why he did it, right? But if that is the case, I to your point, I do think that that can detract from that message. But I also think that people would not be fascinated in any way, nor would they be enamored by him if he looked like Shrek. Sorry, I said it.
Yep. That's kind of how I feel too. So yeah, I agree.
People want to like him because it's that pretty privilege, right? I mean, I've said this to a couple people, watching little bits and pieces of Karen Reed trial. I mean, she looks like a miserable, and people are not going to like that. She's attractive, but her personality coming out at trial. I would be very worried if I were her lawyers about how the jury is going to see that. I mean, it matters. All that to say, I think appearance matters, and we wouldn't be sitting here if he was ugly.
For sure.
Do you think he knew he was attractive? Oh, please. Yes, I do. I think he knew. He'd be making eyes at the camera all the time.
Yeah, he's got a swagger and a cocky look, and he's working it. He knows he's got appeal.
Yeah, listen, he might not have one now, but he's had a mirror in the recent past. Like, he knows what's up. Have you seen Donald Trump is considering suspension for this purpose? Impact to Luigi Mangione. All right, so people use habeas corpus in different contexts. Tell me what you mean by that, and I'm happy to speak to it. Because lots of times when we talk about habeas, we're talking about a form of relief in federal court that is post-conviction. So tell me what you mean by that, and I'm happy to speak to it. Who are we discussing? Oh boy, somebody just got here. Luigi Mangione, cousin Luigi.
Who are we talking about? It's funny too. Like, did you say you're Italian? Yeah. So it's funny because when I first started making videos, I said Mangione, and I had a Sicilian and an Italian say it's Mangione. Please say his name right. It's Mangione. And so I've been saying Mangione, but you've been saying Mangione, and it's funny. It's like I don't know which way to say it.
Yeah, just like it's not. I'm sorry, Karen. It's not Agnifilo. It's Agnifilo. But that's not how they say it. It's Americanized. So I've just been trying to use what other people say. But it is Mangione. Yeah. People slaughter my name, but mine's a little bit easier. I just pinned it. Look at this. Uh-oh. Is Karen Italian too? No, Karen is, her maiden name is Friedman. She's Jewish. I'm not sure what her
her husband's Italian, I believe.
I'm not sure what her ethnic heritage is beyond that she is a Jewish woman. Impact to challenge detention. I don't think he's getting out on any type of even super high secured bond any chance at all. I don't even think that Karen would probably ask for that. How would you pronounce Karen's last name? I mean, she says Agnifilo, so gotta say it the way she wants to say it. Never let him out anytime soon. I agree, Natasha. I don't think he's going anywhere. He's safer inside. That's also a really good point. I think that for as many people that love him and admire him and think he's great, there are other people that might want to come for him. And, you know, at least he is somewhat safe and secure where he is. It's impacting the trial. Yeah, nobody wants to admit that, but it does matter. Pretty privilege is a real thing. More danger from all the crazy women. Yeah, yeah. Nobody'd want to kill him. Everybody would just be trying to get at him.
I've had a feeling for some time, like when there was a court appearance in which Luigi was in Bulletproof Vest, and they tried to make it sound like that was done to make him look bad, and I said it's the opposite. If somebody takes him out under their care, there's going to be a hell to pay. So they want to make sure they protect him at all costs, because if he dies under their watch, that's going to be horrible on them. So
I also think that was, I mean, it also makes him look vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
So people might feel sorry for him. Oh my God, somebody's trying to hurt him. Chances will Southern District of New York make to their jury selection? What changes will they make to the jury selection? High-profile case, if any. I don't think they'll make changes to the process, because that's just kind of, it's a standard process. I believe that those jury questionnaires will be very detailed. It is going to be a death penalty jury, so that adds another layer of qualification. So in that regard, it will be different from, for example, Diddy's trial that's set to start on Monday. But that jury selection process will be, with the exception of the death analysis, will be much the same as it is in any federal trial. It'll take a lot longer, though, because everybody knows Luigi, everybody's familiar with the case, and people have all probably watched things, and so the judge will just have to take special care during the voir dire process to make sure that people who know about the case can set that aside and be fair and impartial. Very conservative people. Yeah, I mean, there's conservative people everywhere. It's entirely possible he may have several conservative people on his jury, but I think it's also likely he's got several people that are going to sympathize with him on the jury. Only Manhattan. Nope. So, and yeah, that's the thing about federal jury selection. It's a wider swath of the population, because those federal districts are larger than, say, you know, it's not just going to be New York County. It's going to be a much larger swath of the population in the area. State Congress raises a lot of constitutional issues. Because if he is to defend himself in the state case, he would potentially be prejudicing himself later in the federal case. That there would be things that he would have to, defenses he would have to set forth that he would then give up the right to raise, or he would kind of shoot himself in the foot in the federal case. Essentially, Karen is saying, if you force us to do that, then you're basically cutting us off at the knees in the federal case, which is why she wants them to go in the opposite order, because the federal case is the more serious case. Queens, New York residents won't be called. I don't know what the actual map lines look like for where SENY pulls their jury pool. I'd have to look at the district.
I want to take a stab, and this is you giving me a correction on your legal authority. Someone said they wanted an example of that double jeopardy, basically making it difficult in your other case. I have an example, and you tell me whether I'm way off base. If, for example, they say, well, look, you were endangering the public. You shot him on a public street. There was a bunch of people around. You endangered the public. It was an act of terrorism. But then they counter and say, no, this was targeted one individual. Then the other thing says, you just admitted it was targeted on one guy. It's a stalking charge. You went after one guy. So by admitting that, no, this was a targeted thing on one person, not the population, you could be prejudicing yourself maybe in the other thing by saying you just admitted you were targeting one guy and stalking one guy.
Yeah, I mean, by raising one defense in a case, you are essentially boxing yourself in, and you will not be able to then argue to the contrary or in the alternative in the subsequent trial. That's the problem. Remain silent. Yes, always good to keep your flappy trap shut, for sure. I'm actually surprised he talked to the officers that cornered him at that McDonald's as much as he did, to be frank. I'm surprised he didn't just immediately.
Well, and there's an argument, and I don't know this is the case, but there's an argument to be made that he knows Pennsylvania law and he knew that they hadn't told him anything yet, and so maybe he knew it wouldn't stand up. Now, I think that's a huge gamble to take because you have to trust that you're going to win that battle, right? But I don't know.
You also have to trust that you're encountering cops who know what they're doing, which, as we saw from those video clips, they did. What was the question about Miranda? I just missed it. Something about. What do you think about no Miranda rights for 20 minutes? I think that anything that he said prior to is a good chance of being suppressed. Uh-oh, what have I done?
Yeah, the most. Not to beat a dead horse, but I tend to do that. The most telling moment was when the officer, I think it was Officer Patrolman Fox, that said, after 17 minutes, he asked Detweiler, did you read him his Miranda rights and did you tell him he was under investigation? And he said no. So then they tell him at that moment he's under investigation, and he specifically said, now that you have been informed you're under investigation, do you want to tell us that your name is Mark Rosario? And he's like, no, I'm Luigi Mangione.
Any statement under oath that he makes can be used against him in another trial. That's the point. If we slow down.
I think, somebody asked about the ballistics. I think the ballistics things is going to be also kind of a new area, 3D printed gun and the ballistics that involved in 3D printed weapons. That's going to add a new element to this case. I don't think there's a lot of court research into the forensics on 3D printed guns yet. So I'm curious how that's going to play out.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. And I don't know how that works because normally the way that they'll match, like they'll either recover the projectile from him during the autopsy and compare it to the striations in the barrel. I don't know how that works with a 3D printed gun. Do they even have those distinctive markers the way that a traditionally manufactured weapon would?
Not to get off on a tangent. I think the barrel is still metal, the outside is not. But so if it is, then it's probably still going to leave striations on the bullet. But I don't know. I'm curious as well.
And I mean, obviously, we heard a lot about the casings that they recovered because, of course, the cops just couldn't wait to go out and push the narrative about the healthcare motive by releasing the information about the etching on the casings. But
there was Karen had a really interesting observation. I seem to be the only person who brings this up. She mentioned about the casings. She said there was words written that denied, opposed, which one was it? Denied, opposed, delay, whatever. 2 of those words were written on casings and 1 on a bullet. And I thought, that's the first I've heard that. What do you mean on a bullet? Does that mean it was not to get graphic, on the bullet that was in, that had entered the body? Or does that mean an unspent bullet that hadn't been fired that was left at the case? Like, what does it mean when they say specifically 2 were on casings and 1 on a bullet? I've been like, how come nobody else is asking that question? What the hell does that mean? 2 on casings and 1 on a bullet?
Yeah, and also that's kind of interesting because, of course, the bullet leaves the casing when it's fired. And so how would he have been able to write on it, or how would have somebody been able to write on it while it was still intact? That almost doesn't, it makes you wonder if that's not some sort of a semantic distinction, that maybe she, when you say bullet, you're referring to the projectile inside the casing. Maybe that's not what she's referring to. But, we also we've heard so much about the casings, haven't really heard anything about any of the actual projectiles that they may have recovered during the autopsy. I don't know if any of them were through and through, or if they recovered all of them.
It's super weird, the casings, because, again, not to take forever, but originally I heard that the words were written in a Sharpie on the casings, and then I heard they were etched in, and then I heard they were etched in and then written over with the Sharpie, and I'm like, and now you add in 2 on casings and 1 on a bullet, and I'm like, what the hell? Like, I don't even know what to believe anymore on what was written on the bullets or not, But,
we might have to wait for trial to get clarity on that.
Right.
We've stalled.
I have thoughts on the question from Rain, which is, do you think the stalking charges are going to stick? But I'd like to hear your take on that.
Oh, yeah, I think that they have problems. I remember early on looking at the statute and thinking they might have a problem here. But I'll be curious to see what evidence they would have presented to the grand jury in support of those charges. And of course, we don't get to know that right now. What's your theory?
Well, to me, the stalking charges came in because they're trying to say that he used, internet searches and things like this, and then he crossed state lines. And the entire purpose for the federal case was that, hey, you used interstate commerce to come across one state line to another, and therefore it makes it a federal case and whatever. And I don't know that I have feelings about whether or not they're going to stick, but I think that it has to, because the whole basis of the federal case is you came across state lines, or you used public transportation, like a bus, for example, across federal roads to get into the state. And so it feels like it has to stick, because that's the whole purpose of making it a federal case, is that it came across state lines to commit this murder against somebody specifically in New York. But that was my kind of thought.
Oh, I was stuck. I was like, everybody stopped.
Oh, did you freeze up?
Yeah, they were frozen. I could see all these. Okay. What are your thoughts on how the evidence handled a McDonald's total cluster? Other possible shooters given Van Thompson's insider trading scheme? Certainly possible.
Here's the thing, like since we're still here, I pointed this out. There was 2 major protests of United Healthcare in the months ahead of the shooting. One in April, and I think it was, and one in July or June, and because the whole denial of claims thing was making national press, and then there was a huge Department of Justice investigation into antitrust laws, there are literally millions of people with potential motive for going after Brian Thompson. So that's why it's like, maybe Luigi did it, but there's literally like a million people who have potential motive. But
And interestingly, didn't I read somewhere that neither Luigi nor his immediate family had ever been insured under a United Healthcare plan?
Correct. That's what I believe. I vetted that as well. I don't think any of the family have been a United Healthcare customer. kind of slowing down here on the questions, it seems.
Why would they go after the death penalty if it says specifically that is for political or law enforcement? Because the administration told them to, and they're going to find that work. They're making an example out of him. Thoughts on claim of him having a manifesto? Stop calling it a manifesto. It was a notebook or a journal, if we know. Karen made a big deal about that language as well, that prejudicial language. Don't like that. Manifesto kind of gives you creepy, deranged serial killer vibes, and I think that's prejudicial for Luigi.
Yeah, she specifically stated that that notebook was never intended to go to the public. It was the police officers and law enforcement and prosecution that made that public. So therefore, they're the ones that called it the manifesto. They're the one that made it public. It wasn't Luigi that made it public. So they're prejudicing that by saying that.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you guys for asking awesome questions. I love it. Plus, I'm not afraid to say what I think, which may get me kicked off of TikTok.
You'll take me down with you.
I've been in the TikTok jail quite a few times for being brand new to it, I can say.
There was another thought I had about. I'll come back to it if we're still here. I'm trying to think. There was another thought I had a moment ago. Now I just lost it.
Yeah, that's a good point for our healthcare workers. Like, how hard is it to continue to, try to individually take care of people and offer good care while also knowing that the system is so broken? That's really a good point. That's kind of depressing. A lot of us on the East Coast and tired out. Hey, I'm on the East Coast. I'm still hanging in. Are you? Yes, I am currently. I was born and raised in New York. My whole family's still in New York. But yes, I have lived in South Carolina for a long time before I practiced law.
Did you get any flack from your law firm saying you make sure you don't represent our law firm when you go on TikTok and talk about Luigi?
I work with such a cool group of people, such a supportive group of partners and things. We're like a family, and I'm not the problem. One of my law partners is a CNN political commentator that a lot of people probably know. His name's Bakari Sellers. Bakari does enough talking. Well,
for all of you.
If anything, I could just be like, but look at Bakari, he's talking too much. It's only 11 p.m. on the East Coast. People, come on. Yeah, we don't turn into pumpkins until midnight.
Yeah, we've got some smart people that are in our circle. So I've really appreciated some of the comments already, and I know there's probably some more out there. So fire one out here while you got the opportunity. This is a great opportunity.
Still don't believe he did it. Lots of people agree with you. There's a whole lot of people out there that don't think he did it. How active can he be into? Uh-oh. How active? Oops. In terms of talking to the public beyond letters, such as social media. So he should not have access to social media in the jail because he will not have an internet connection. If he was on social media, I would imagine that Karen would have something to say about that. He should not be on social media. I'm in Charlotte and we love Bakari. Oh, that's so sweet. We love Bakari too. Bakari lived in Charlotte for the longest. How many times do you think he's meeting with his attorneys? I think somebody said that they're seeing him weekly. That doesn't surprise me. There's been a lot going on. I would imagine that they're in regular contact with him. Is there any way for him to get bail? Yes. So usually at the arraignment in federal court, you have the opportunity to do what we call waiving detention for the moment, which is to say that I'm not petitioning for bail right now, but I reserve the right to do it in the future. That being said, it's kind of like a one-shot deal. Once you ask for it, if it's denied, you really don't have to their opportunity absent some change in circumstance. So normally, you know, I practice a lot in federal court. I will almost always 100% of the time waive detention at that initial arraignment, and then make a decision about whether it would be appropriate to petition for it at a later time. Not to bore everybody to death, but there's what we call mandatory detention by statute for certain federal cases, which means that there is a presumption that the person should be detained without any type of bail or bond pending the trial. And this would be one of those cases. And so that means that the government's position is always going to be that detention is mandatory. So you're almost kind of wasting your breath, but he does have the opportunity to have a hearing to try to ask for that. It's just unlikely he would get it. Sorry, that was kind of a long-winded answer.
It's all good.
Sometimes it means they don't have much on him, or it could just mean that they're incompetent, which is entirely. Is it the norm that is it that the inmate calls be shared with the prosecution? Okay, great question. I've heard this a lot. People are like incredulous that this is happening. So jails record phone calls from detainees at the detention center. They are not supposed to record calls with lawyers, and different detention centers do this differently. Sometimes there's like a register of numbers. They know not to record from this number because that's registered as an attorney number. But those recorded calls are then sent to the prosecution. Prosecution will almost always listen to them for any kind of juicy nugget they can use against the person. You know, I've personally had a situation. I had a double murder trial last summer where we got all the way through the trial. And my client got on the jail phone and was laughing about the victims in the case and was saying, haha, like along the lines of like, anyways, it was not good, okay? And you best believe that those recordings of those calls came up on the last day of trial and changed just about everything. And so prosecutors will routinely listen to those calls because they're hoping for something. They're hoping that somebody is going to say something that to their family, to their friends, or something that they can use to make that person look bad. They cannot listen to calls with attorneys. That should have never happened. But yes, they do record phone calls. They should not record attorney calls. And any attorney calls that are recorded, those recordings should not be sent over to the DA's office. They listen to them. Ask me how I know. Oh boy, was that a fun day. What's the point of attorney-client privilege if they can do that? Well, they're not supposed to listen to the attorney calls. But again, going back, again, a personal note, I do not have substantive conversations with my clients on jail phones or jail video visitation. They tell me they don't record it. I don't believe them. This is a perfect example of why. If I have something really important or very sensitive to talk about with my client beyond how you doing, are you hanging in there, does your mama need to put some money on your commissary, I go and I talk to them in person because it's just not worth the risk. And I'm not in any way blaming Karen. It's not her fault. It wasn't her responsibility. What I'm saying is this is the reason why we as lawyers are so careful about those calls and those visits. It's because of situations like this, because things like this can happen. And like we were saying earlier, you cannot put that toothpaste back in the tube. Once it's out, it's out.
Speaking of commissary and stuff like that, what do you think? How are the funds accessed by the public that's donating to Luigi's funds, to his defense? Is the defense pulling from that money yet? Is it going towards his commissary if he wants extra commissary? Like who's deciding where that money goes and gets spent?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't even know what forum they use to crowdsource that money. In terms of commissary, anybody should be able to put money on his books, as we say. I bet you his commissary has, as Kendrick Lamar would say, made it to commas. I bet you he's got money in there. But in terms of the money that was raised, like who has access to it, when can Karen and her team make use of those funds? That's a great question. I don't know who was authorized on his behalf to kind of allocate those funds. That'd be kind of an interesting issue to find out some more about. Give, send, go. Yeah, see, and I'm not familiar with that platform, and I don't know who set it up or who has access to it and how they would again, how they would allocate the funds. You can only go 2 times a month. Yeah, you got to load up on that commissary. You don't get to go shopping very often. Even if he somehow got bail in the federal case with the state, pick him up and put him in jail. Yep, he'd still have to go and get a bond in state court, which he would. So essentially, he'd have to like win 2 bond hearings. Ain't happening. And then you also have Pennsylvania. But if he bonded out, he would leave BOP custody. He would no longer be in the custody of the U.S. Marshals. He would be in the custody of New York State, and he'd probably go to Rikers, is my understanding. He doesn't want to be there. And even if he got out of there, then he'd go to Pennsylvania. I don't know what Altoona jail looks like, but no Rikers, please. Yeah, no kidding. Oh, okay. Yeah. I'll just keep him. I'll send him here. I live in Europe. Yes, I'm sure there's a lot of people that would be happy to have him in the event that he was no longer detained.
I volunteer for tribute. That's funny. Thanks for coming. My kid in his own place, we can have quiet. He's probably had enough of quiet is the thing. I'm sure. Not really. All right, all the ladies are volunteering now. Come on, guys, fire those questions in, or we're going to wrap up. We don't want to get too slow and have this be a dead show. So let's get some questions in, or we're going to wrap it up.
If case fails, his dollar state bond said it's determination. We pay to release him. I mean, if that's true, I don't. If that's accurate and his bond is set at $1, then yeah. But again, remember, he's got to go to Pennsylvania. If New York and the Fed cases convicted him of the PA charges be dropped, that would be in the prosecutor's discretion. But I would imagine, yeah, that they wouldn't pursue it. But it's also possible they may. If they think that the other 2 might come back on appeal and there was a chance, they may want to kind of, as twisted as it sounds, they may want to have that Pennsylvania conviction as kind of like an extra layer of protection to make sure he doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
What would you do if you were his lawyer? I think Karen A is doing a beautiful job from what I can see. I know there's a lot behind the scenes that we don't see. I think it's really tricky when you have any type of case that has gotten any kind of media attention, let alone being like a worldwide phenomenon like Luigi's cases. You have to manage public perception. You have to manage pretrial press. And then you also have this client who's facing the most difficult thing any human being could possibly experience. And then you're also dealing with his family, and you're juggling all of that while also fighting, this huge power of the government. The government's got a lot of time, they got a lot of resources, they have a lot of manpower. Karen and her team are just a few people up against, the United States of America. That's a huge deal, right? But what would I do? I'd probably do exactly what she's doing. I'd be trying to manage that public perception, manage that press, all while doing a heck of a job being very deliberate in the way that I was building a defense. You start from what would my closing argument look like in his trial? And every decision that you make from there on out has to be building on what is your closing argument going to be. Every decision you make needs to make sense. And I think I can already see that she knows exactly where she's going with this. And I love watching her. She's such a good lawyer. Good choice on his part.
Yeah, and it's a little unfair question to you because one of the things is you don't know what Karen knows, right? Because so her defense is based a lot on what she knows, and there's things we don't know that she knows. So we can't. It's impossible to say how you would defend Luigi when you don't know all the things. I'm presuming you don't know all the things that Karen knows, right? So it's hard to say.
Even stylistically, with the choices that she made, I think are very smart thus far. I think she's got him in a very good place with public perception, and under the circumstances, he's doing a heck of a lot better than most people in that scenario would be doing. And I think a lot of that is owed to Karen and how carefully and deliberately and competently she's handled his case.
I love, as an aside, I love the move that she made by setting up an official website with the court tracking of all three jurisdictions so that she can keep everybody informed. I thought that was brilliant.
I love that. And, also, like, I'm sure selfishly for her that, that's a lot less work of her office fielding calls and inquiries and things. They can just direct them to that website. They've also done a really good job of just keeping that up to date. The links work. It's clean. It's simple. Brilliant idea on her part. I loved that. I agree. What advice would you give to his family on how to support him? Just be there for him. Don't beat him up. Don't try to talk about the case. Just be there for him. None of us can possibly imagine what it's like to be detained facing a possible death sentence. And the last thing he probably wants to talk about with the people that he loves is that. He's probably worn out talking to his lawyers about it. So make him feel human, make him feel like a person, do things and talk about things that bring him joy, and try to keep his spirits up because it's dark days.
Here's a question for you. How important is it to Luigi, you think, that he's getting mail from so many people and so much support, and that he's, and he's taken the time, he's inundated with hundreds and hundreds of letters that are coming, and they're not getting it to him in this speedy fashion, right? Which they're not obligated to do that. But the point being is, how important is that to him? Is it helping him not be bored all day long? How do you think that's it?
And also just from a mental health standpoint, you know how lonely it has to be back there. And there are so many people that are facing serious criminal charges in states and federal detention centers across the country that have no one, that have no family support. Nobody in their community knows their name, let alone in the world. And so, without that, I think that it could probably get incredibly lonely. Your mind goes to dark places. I think it's probably a distraction for him, an encouragement for him. I think it's probably very good for his mental health.
Well, hey guys, listen, I think because people want to see this on YouTube, I think we should wrap this up before either Allie or I make a mistake and get ourselves cut off and can't download this live. So I think we've gotten really lucky and we've done well. I'm going to recommend that we wrap up, if that's okay with you, so that we can get this in the can, let people see it. If you're willing sometime, I would love to have you back on the show again, especially if we get some kind of legal document that has some meat to it that we got to discuss. So do you have any parting thoughts for anybody on your way out?
I appreciate you so much. This has been so much fun. For anybody who doesn't know me, I'm pretty brand new to TikTok. I've certainly never done a live before. I think this is great. This is just you guys are asking great questions. This is good insight into what potential jurors are probably also thinking and feeling. So this is a great tool. This is helpful for me, as a lawyer, and also just because I love this case and I love following this case. So thank you for the opportunity. This has been really cool. I appreciate you very much.
Yeah, and thank you. It was some of my followers were recommending you because they saw you and they loved your content. They said, "Oh my God, you got to get her on." So you can give a special thanks to our friends. And I hope you guys have all followed her. This is your last chance. Follow her right now if you're not doing it. Watch all of her content. I will try to get her back on again when I can finagle some time out of her to get back on the live with me. It's been great, everybody. This will be on YouTube. Yes, by the way, for those who have been asking, I am watching the Brian Kohberger special. That's the other case that I'm following, and I will be watching Dateline's special on Brian Kohberger, and I'll be doing a full detail of that for you as well. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Allie, for coming on. It's been a super, super pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you.